Attend, O reader, our tale of wonder. Welcome back to Paper Cuts, everybody. Last week, Renfield was acting real weird, and Lucy's mom is trying not to die from the stress of moving all those garlic flowers that were secretly protecting Lucy's life. And also, we finally remembered that Arthur, you know, uh, that character that we've been voicing normally this whole time should have had like a Texas cowboy accent the whole time. So that's fun for me. I'm going to enjoy the many emails I'm gonna get about that. Hang on. Sorry, there's a very aggressive breeze coming in, and I'm sure it is doing my sound quality no favors. Um, actually, okay, I need to check my sound quality through Twitch here because I did a lot of stuff on my end and I should have done this before I hit record, and I'm apologizing to future me here, but I did a lot of sound checking recently, and I want to see how it sounds for the viewer. So I'm gonna say some things, and then I'm gonna mute my mic. Ooh, wait. Oh, good, the captions are working. It's always good to see the captions working. Anyway, I'm gonna mute my mic real quick, and we're gonna see how everything sounds. Okay, yeah, that seems to sound better than it has. I think the treatment in particular. Uh, ooh, hang on a second. Anyway, good news, everyone. The podcast sounds better. uh, I've been saying for years, I don't need to get a new mic. I don't need to get a new mic. I just need to treat my space a little better. And then I didn't treat my space. So I remembered to treat my space again, and we are ready to begin. Let's dive into chapter 13 of Dracula by Bram Stoker, where we are jumping into Dr. Seward's diary once more. This is. It's unclear. Are all of the entries in Dr. Seward's diary on this wax cylinder? Or are like some of them on wax cylinder and then written back down? It's kind of unclear. Uh, I know several of the early diary entries are noted, like, obviously, to have been stated to have been recorded on a wax cylinder and then into a dictation machine, and then hand penned down onto a journal. In the same way that some of the earlier chapters were expressly mentioned to have been in shorthand, like all of Jonathan Harker's early chapters were expressly mentioned to have been in shorthand. Uh, Probably to obfuscate them from Dracula. Uh, but it's fun. Anyway, now that I've yutzed about setting details, who dis? Yeah, you seem alright. Sorry. Uh, Now that I've gotten thoroughly distracted, chapter 13 for real. Dr. Seward's diary continued. The funeral was arranged for the next succeeding day, so that Lucy and her mother might be buried together. Oh, Lucy and her mother have died. I forgot about that from last week. Oops. Uh, I attended to all the ghastly formalities, and the urbane undertaker provided that his staff were afflicted or blessed with something of his own obsequious suavity. Even the woman who performed the last offices for the dead remarked to me in a confidential, brother professional way, when she had come out from the death chamber, She makes a very beautiful corpse, sir. It's quite a privilege to attend on her. It's not too much to say that she will do credit to our establishment. I noticed that Van Helsing never kept far away. This was possible from the disordered state of things in the household. There were no relatives at hand, and as Arthur had to be back the next day to attend at his father's funeral, we were unable to notify anyone who should have been bidden. Under the circumstances, Van Helsing and I took it upon ourselves to examine papers, etc. He insisted upon looking over Lucy's papers himself. I asked him why, for I feared that he, being a foreigner, might not be quite aware of English legal requirements, and so might in ignorance make some unnecessary trouble. He answered me, I know, you forget I am a lawyer as well as doctor, but this is not altogether for the law. This is French, this is not German. I'm gonna give... Van Helsing no longer has accent. Accent deleted. This is not altogether for the law. You knew that when you avoided the coroner. I have more than him to avoid. There may be papers more, such as this. As he spoke, he took from his pocketbook the memorandum which had been in Lucy's breast, and which she had torn in her sleep. When you find anything of the solicitor, who is for the late Mrs. Westenra, seal all her papers and write him tonight. For me, I watch here in the room, and in Miss Lucy's old room all night, and I myself search for what may be. It is not well that her very thoughts go into the hands of strangers. I went on with my part of the work, and in another half hour had found the name and address of Mrs. Westenra's solicitor, and had written to him. All the poor lady's papers were in order. Explicit directions regarding place of burial were given. I had hardly sealed the letter when, to my surprise, Van Helsing walked into the room, saying, "Can I help you, friend John? I am free, and if I may, my services to you." "Have you got what you looked for?" I asked, to which he replied, "I did not look for any specific thing. I only hoped to find I have, that all there was, with some letters and a few memoranda and a diary new begun. I have them here, and we shall, for the present, say nothing of them. I shall see that poor lad tomorrow evening, and with his sanction I shall see some, or I shall use some." When he had finished the work in hand, he said to me, "And now, friend John, I think we may go to bed. You want sleep, both you and I, and rest to recuperate. Tomorrow we shall have much to do, but for tonight there is no need of us, alas." Before turning in, we went to look at poor Lucy. The undertaker had certainly done his work well, for the room was turned into a small chapelle ardente. There was a wilderness of beautiful white flowers, and death was made as little repulsive as might be. The end of the winding sheet was laid over the face, when the professor bent over it and turned it gently back. We both started at the beauty before us, the tall wax candles showing a sufficient light to note it well. All Lucy's loveliness had come back to her in death, and the hours that had passed, instead of leaving traces of decay's effacing fingers, had restored the beauty of life. Till positively I could not believe my eyes that I was looking. The professor looked sternly grave. He had not loved her as I had, and there was no need for tears in his eyes. He said to me, "Remain until I return," and left the room. He came back with a handful of wild garlic from the box waiting in the hall, but which had not been opened, and placed the flowers amongst the others on and around the bed. Then he took from his neck, inside his collar, a little gold crucifix, and placed it over the mouth. He restored the sheet to its place, and we came away. I was undressing in my own room, when, with a promontory tap at the door, he entered, and at once began to speak. "Tomorrow I want you to bring me, before night, a set of post-mortem knives." "Must we make an autopsy?" "Yes and no. I want to operate, but not as you think. Let me tell you now, but not a word to another. I want to cut off her head and take out her heart." "You, a surgeon, and so shocked?"
You, whom I've seen with no tremble of hand or heart, do operations of life and death that make the rest shudder. Oh, but I must not forget, my dear friend John, that you loved her, and I have not forgotten it. For it is I that shall operate, and you must only help. I would like to do it tonight, but for Arthur I must not. To be to He will be free after his father's funeral tomorrow, and he will want to see her, to see it. Then, when she's confined, ready for the next day, when she's coffined, ready for the next day, you and I shall come when all sleep. We shall unscrew the coffin lid, and shall do our operation, then replace all, so that none know, save we alone.
But why do it at all? That girl is dead. Why mutilate her poor body without need? And if there's no necessity for a post-mortem, and nothing to gain by it, no good to her, to us, to science, to human knowledge, why do it without it? Without such, it is monstrous.
For answer, he put his hand on my shoulder, and said with infinite tenderness, Friend John, I pity your poor bleeding heart, and I love you more, because it does so bleed. If I could, I would take on myself the burden that you do bear, but there are things you know not, but that you shall know, and bless me for knowing, though they are not pleasant things. John, my child, you have been my friend now many years, yet did you ever know me to do anything without good cause? I may err, I am but man, but I believe in all that I do. And was it not for these causes that you sent for me when the great trouble came? Yes. Were you not amazed, nay, horrified, when I would not let Arthur kiss his love, though she was dying, and snatched him away by all my strength? Yes. And yet you saw how she thanked me with her so beautiful dying eyes, and her voice so weak, and she kissed my old rough hand and blessed me. Yes, did you not hear me swear promise to her, that she so closed her eyes grateful? Yes. Well, I have good reason now for all I want to do. You have for many years trusted me. You have believed me in the weeks past, when there be things so strange you might have well doubted. Believe me yet a little, friend John. If you do not trust me, then I must tell what I think, and that is not perhaps well. And if, as I work, so work I shall, no matter what, no matter trust or no trust, without my friends' trust in me. I work with a heavy heart, and feel, oh, so lonely when I want all help and courage that may be. He paused for a moment, and then went on, solemn. Friend John, there are strange and terrible days before us. Let us not be two, but one, that so we work to a good end. Will you not have faith in me?
I so took his hand and promised him. I held my door open as he went away, and watched him go into the room and close the door. As I stood without moving, I saw one of the maids silently pass along the passage. She had her back toward me, so she did not see me, and go into the room where Lucy lay. The sight touched me. Devotion is so rare, and we are so grateful to those who show it, unmasked to those we love. Here was a poor girl setting aside the terrors which she had naturally had of death, to go watch alone by the air of the mistress whom she loved, so that the poor clay might not be lonely till laid to eternal rest. I must have slept long and soundly, for it was broad daylight when Van Helsing wakened me by coming into my room. He came over to my bedside and said, "You need not trouble about the knives. We shall not do it." Why not?
For his solemnity of the night before had greatly impressed me. Because it is too late or too early. See, here he held up the little golden crucifix. This was stolen in the night.
How stolen, since you have it now?
Because I get it back from the worthless wretch who stole it, from the woman who robbed the dead and the living. Her punishment will surely come, but not through me. She knew not altogether what she did, and thus unknowing she only stole. Now we must wait." He went away on that word, leaving me with a new mystery to think of a new puzzle to grapple. The forenoon was a dreary time, but at noon the solicitor came, Mr. Marquard, of Holman, Sons, Marquard, and Liverdale. He was very genial and very appreciative of what we had done, and took off our hands all cares as to details. During lunch he told us that Mrs. Stenra had for some time expected sudden death from her heart, and had put her affairs in absolute order. He informed us that with the exception of certain entailed property of Lucy's father, which now, in default of direct issue, went back to a distant branch of the family, the whole estate, real and personal, was left absolutely to Mr. Arthur Holmwood. When he had told us so much, he went on, "Frankly, we did our best to prevent such a testamentary disposition, and pointed out certain contingencies that might leave her daughter either penniless or not so free as she should be to act in regarding a matrimonial alliance. Indeed, we pressed the matter so far we almost came into collision, for she asked us if we were or were not prepared to carry out her wishes. Of course, we then had no alternative but to accept. We were right in principle, and 99 times out of 100 we should have proved, by the logic of events, the accuracy of our judgment. Frankly, however, I must admit that in this case any other form of disposition would have been rendered impossible, would have rendered the carrying out of her wishes impossible. For by her predecessing her daughter, the latter would have come into possession of the property, and even had she only survived her mother by 5 minutes, her property would, in case there were no will, and a will was a practical impossibility in such a case, have been treated at her decease as under intestacy. I assume that means there's, like, competing claims to the land? I don't know that legal term off the top of my head. Let's find out, actually. Intestacy. Intestacy. Intestacy is the state of dying without a will. If a person dies without a will, they are said to have died intestate. The estate of a person who has died intestate goes through probate court, and so can land practically anywhere that makes some legal sense. Noted. Where was I? In which case, Lord Godalming, though so dear a friend, would have had no claim in the world, and the inheritors, being remote, would not be likely to abandon their just rights for sentimental reasons regarding an entire stranger. I assure you, my dear sirs, I'm rejoiced at the result, perfectly rejoiced. I would be too, honestly. That would be, it would make the estate issue much more of an open and shut case. But I'm not an estate lawyer, so I don't know the personal tastes of estate lawyers. Anyway, he was a good fellow, but his rejoicing at the one little part in which he was officially interested of so great a tragedy was an object lesson in the limitations of sympathetic understanding. He did not remain long, but said he would look in later in the day and see Lord Godalming. His coming, however, had been a certain comfort to us, since it assured us that we should not have to dread hostile criticism to any of our acts. Arthur was expected at 5 o'clock, so a little before that time we visited the death chamber. It was so, in very truth, for now both mother and daughter lay in it. The undertaker, true to his craft, had made the best display that he could of his goods, and there was a mortuary air about the place that lowered our spirits at once. Van Helsing ordered the former arrangement to be adhered to, explaining that as Lord Godalming was coming very soon, it would be less harrowing to his feelings to see that all was left of his fiancée quite alone. The undertaker seemed shocked at his own stupidity, and exerted himself to restore things to the condition in which we left them the night before, so that when Arthur came, such shocks to his feelings as we could avoid were spared. Poor fellow! He looked desperately and broken. Even his stalwart manhood seemed to have shrunk somewhat under the strain of this much tired emotion. He had, I knew, been very genuinely and devotedly attached to his father, and to lose him, and at such a time, was even worse, a bitter blow to him. With me he was as warm as ever, and with Van Helsing he was perfectly courteous rather, but I could not help seeing that there was some constraint with him. The professor noticed it too, and noticed me to bring him upstairs, or motioned me to bring him upstairs. I did so, and left him at the door of the room, as I felt he would like to try to be quite alone with her. But he took my arm and led me in, saying briskly, "You loved her, old fellow. You loved her too, old fellow. She told me all about it. There was no friend that had a closer place in her heart than you. I don't know how to thank you for all you done for her. I can't think yet." He suddenly broke down, threw his arms around my shoulders, laid his head on my chest, crying, "Jack, Jack, what shall I do? The whole of my life was gone from me, all at once, and there's nothing in the wide world for me to live for any more." I confronted him as well as I could. In such cases men do not need such expression. A grip of the hand, the tightening of an arm over the shoulder, a sob in unison are expressions of sympathy dear to a man's heart. I stood still and silent till his sobs dried away, and then I said soft to him, "Come take a look at her." Helping, together. We moved over to the bed and lifted. Together we moved over to the bed and lifted the lawn from her face. God, how beautiful she was! Every hour seemed to be enhancing her loveliness. It frightened and amazed me somewhat, and as for Arthur, he fell a trembling, and he was finally shaken with doubt as to an awe. After a wild pause, he told me in a faint whisper, "Jack, is she really dead?" I assured him sadly that it was so, and went on to suggest, for I felt that such horrible doubt should not have life for a moment longer than I can help, that it often happened after death faces became more youthful and softened by their beauty. This was equally so when death had preceded, especially so when death had been preceded by any acute or prolonged suffering. It seemed to do away with my doubt, and and after kneeling beside the couch for a moment, and looking at her lovingly and long, he turned aside. I told him that must be goodbye, as the coffin had to be prepared. As he went back and took her dead hand in his he took her dead hand in his and kissed it, then bent over and kissed her forehead. He came away, finally looking back over his shoulder at her as he came.
no, I'm not sleepy, he said. Definitely not gonna have to stand up to read, he said. Apologies if I'm... Oh, I'm far too close to the mic. I could just stand back here. Am I still on camera? I'm getting very slightly cut off. Zoot. There we go. Apologies. I've been sitting a lot lately. I need to stand anyway. Sound is great at that distance, though. Like, standing up here, the mic isn't too hot? Are you sure? I mean, I will take your word for it. You're the one on the other end of the stream. I just... Oh, I'm too close. Stretch distance. Yeah, yeah, if this is not, like, super peaking the mic, I don't need a headset there. Yeah, I'm worried about the mic getting too hot is the trouble. I don't want to peak it really badly. uh, yeah, that's kind of the mind I have here. Let me adjust some things really quickly. That may help. It's a tiny bit loud. So if I stand back here, how do I sound? You know, I'm gonna keep talking so it's actually evident. Because I'd happily stand back here. This was actually the plan. Yeah, I just don't want to peak the mic. I know this mic is very, very sensitive. Okay, there's good. Good. Lovely. Where was I? Yeah, you were about to drawing room. There we go. I left him in the drawing room and told Van Helsing that he had said goodbye. So the latter went to the kitchen to tell the undertaker's men to proceed with the preparations and screw up the coffin. When he came out of the room again, I told him of Arthur's question, and he replied, "I am not surprised. Just now I doubted for a moment myself." We all dined together, and I could see that poor Art was trying to make the best of things. Van Helsing had been silent all dinner time, but when we had lit our cigars, he said, "Lord, Lord," but Arthur interrupted him. "No, no, not that, for God's sake, not yet at any rate. Forgive me, sir. I didn't mean to speak so offensively. It's only because my loss is so recent." The professor answered very sweetly, "I only used that name because I was in doubt. I must not call you Mister, and I've grown to love you. Yes, my dear boy, to love you as Arthur." Arthur held out his hand. Eh? Oh, that's in shot? Unacceptable. A portal to Mario World? If only. Of course all my nice treatment is in shot. How long has that been in shot? Hopefully not long. Is that still there? Is that a thing? That's still very blatantly in shot. Okay, we'll just do this. Maybe? That works, probably. What's this? This is Cadman. Only all stream. Love it. The mic is in shot. Gross. I'm moving you all slightly to the right. Problem solved. See, this is why I need people in chat to see what's going on. Because the webcam is itty bitty on my screen. Well, now you've all scooched over and the mic isn't in shot anymore. Where was I? Try again. Arthur held out his hand and took the old man's warm. Call me what you will. I hope I may always have the title of friend. And let me say that I'm at a loss for words to thank you for your goodness to my poor dear. Now we see a kitchen? Oh, yeah, the kitchen's in shot. That is my kitchen, by the way. I am producing so many anime question marks right now. Do I care about the kitchen being in shot? Well, that puts the mic in shot, so... I do not care enough about the kitchen being in shot. It's not the end of the world. It's mostly clean, actually. It's just kind of like I have a bunch of stuff behind my pans. It's fine. I'm fussing like 10% too much. He paused for a moment and went on. Is that where we left off? See, this is why. See, that's the trouble. Got a little J.J. Abrams son? Oh, of course I do. How can I fix that? Question of the day. Through the power of blankets, I will fortify my curtains. J.J. Abrams' son is coming in there. Haha! Defeated is the monster. So ooh, just do this a little bit. Yeah, I need to fix my curtains because the curtains, fun fact, the curtains are supposed to be up here. But you'll never guess what happened to my curtain rods. I have two cats, and my cats love to hassle the curtain. So, it instead has turned into, we're just going to do this. This is not going to look good, but it will work. Ideally. If I can get it to work. I'll just open my cabinets very slightly and adjust the amount of sun coming in. Everything's fine. This is definitely not a problem. Everything is absolutely fine. No one panic. I definitely have always had this blanket right here. See? Everything's fine. J.J. Abrams' son deleted. Oh, I've completely lost my place. Let's back up a page. Call me what you will. I hope I may always have the title of a friend. And, let me say that I'm at a loss for words to thank you for your goodness to my poor dear. He paused a moment and went on. I know that she understood your goodness even better than I do, and if I was rude or in any way wanting at the time you acted so, you remember. The professor nodded at this. You must forgive me. The professor answered with a grave kindness. I know it was hard for you to quite trust me then, for to trust such violence needs to understand. And I take it that you do not, that you cannot, trust me now, for you do not yet understand. And there may be more times when I shall want you to trust when you cannot, and may not, and must not yet understand. But the time will come when your trust shall be whole and complete in me, and when you shall, understand as though the sunlight himself shone through. Then you shall bless me from the first to the last for your own sake, and for the sake of others, and for all her dear sake to whom I swore to protect. JJ's son, won't you come? Won't you come? JJ's son, won't you come? Won't you come and wash away? Okay, clearly I'm not spacing those right, but good goof, Gurigi. Thank you very much. See, now I'm looking at my webcam and I'm like, wow, I look kind of blue. Well, that's not allowed. So, local man adjusts his stream. All stream. Oh no. How I look edgy. It's the white balance again. It's this automated white balance. It does this to me every time. Oh, now I'm blue. I was specifically adjusting this so I did not come out blue. Thank you. That will do. Local man adjusts his stream for the whole stream. Well, while I'm distracted adjusting stream, let me clean my glasses. Because I have had a smudge on one of my lenses this whole time and it's been driving me bonkers. See, this is why we have the starting soon, so I can look at my stream setup and not fix it in the middle of stream. I was like, no, I don't need a starting soon this week. Everything's fine. No, I direly needed a starting soon this week. Oh crap, that reminds me I need to take my contacts out. I'm glad to have reminded you. Sleeping with your contacts in is, like, an incredibly painful experience. I remember I wore contacts for many years. Um, well, several years, not many. There's a difference between several and many, I promise. Yeah, I wore contacts for several years, and like I made the mistake of sleeping in my contacts one time, and I was like, I'm not doing that anymore. I definitely overstrained because I used to only have to put a contact in. I have 30 days, pop them in, and bam, 1 month, sleep or rise, rain or shine. Ooh, jealous. I had like the reusable contacts where you like, you put them in the solution, it's a whole thing, and like you get new ones every now and again. Like you're not supposed to sleep in them, you're not supposed to go swimming, 5 billion other little caveats. Um, but yeah, I had contacts for a while, and I was blatantly wearing them incorrectly. Like in disregard of like you're not supposed to wear your contacts for that long and all that. I was like, no, I don't want to wear my glasses, and just blatantly misapplying my contacts, and my right eye is definitely worse for it because my right eye already could not see, but like it genuinely cannot. It is legally blind if I have not corrected it. Uh, and it is worse now than when I started with contacts because I was wearing them too long. But I used to only need one contact, but as I've gotten older, this eye is barely needing a little sprinkle of prescription at this point. But I could get by wearing a monocle, to be honest. And I may eventually, if I feel fanciful enough. Anyway, once again, distracted. So much to cut out of this for the podcast, but we take those. Anyway, the sunshine shone through. And indeed, sir, said Arthur warmly. I shall in all ways trust you. I know and believe you've got a very noble heart, and you are Jack's friend, and you were hers. You shall do what you like. The professor cleared his throat a couple times, as though about to speak, and finally said, May I ask you something now? Certainly. You know that Mrs. Westenra left you all her property? Oh, no, poor dear, I never thought of it. Oh, oh my... So for those of you who cannot see the screen, my ebook reader has done a very strange thing. Okay. Whew, clicking next page fixed it. That was weird. Yeah, that was real weird. Fixed it. We're good. Everything's fine. Nobody panic. And as it is all yours, you have a right to deal with it as you will. I want you to give me permission to read all Miss Lucy's papers and letters. Believe me, as it is no idle curiosity, I have a motive of which, be sure, she would have approved. I have them all here. I took them before we knew that all was yours, so that no strange hand might touch them, no strange eye look through the words into her soul. I shall keep them, if I may. Even you may not see them yet, but I shall keep them safe. No word shall be lost, and in the good time I shall give them back to you. It's a hard thing I ask, but you will do it, will you not? For Lucy's sake. Glad to see you, Raz. Appreciate the lurk. Arthur spoke out heartily, like his old self. Dr. Van Helsing, you may do what you will. I feel that in saying this, I'm doing what my dear one would have approved of. I shall not trouble you with questions till the time comes. The old professor stood up as he said solemnly,
And you are right. There will be pain for us all, but it will not all be pain, nor will this pain be the last. We and you too, you most of all, my dear boy, will have to pass through the bitter water before we reach the sweet. But we must be brave of heart and unselfish, and do our duty, and all will be well. I slept on a sofa in Arthur's room that night. Van Helsing did not go to bed at all. He went to and fro, as if patrolling the house, and was never out of sight of the room where Lucy lay in her coffin, strewn with the wild garlic flowers, which sent, through the odor of lily and rose, a heavy, overpowering smell into the night. Now we cut to Mina Harker's journal on the 22nd of September, in the train to Exeter. Jonathan's sleeping. It seems only yesterday that the last entry was made, and yet how much between them! In Whitby and all the world before me, Jonathan away and no news of him, and now married to Jonathan, a solicitor, a partner, rich, master of his business, Mr. Hawkins dead and buried, and Jonathan with another attack that may harm him. Some day he may ask me about it. Down it all goes. I'm rusty in my shorthand. See what unexpected prosperity does for us? So it may be well to freshen it up again with an exercise anyhow. I assume that means the journal's in shorthand? Okay. The service was very simple and very solemn. There were only ourselves and the servants there, one or two old friends of his from Exeter, his London agent, and a gentleman representing Sir John Paxton, the president of the Incorporated Law Society. Jonathan and I stood hand in hand, and we felt that our best and dearest friend was gone from us. We came back to town quietly, taking a bus to Hyde Park Corner. Oh, there's a little apostrophe in front of bus, as in it's a shortening of omnibus. That's cute. I guess that's why we call buses buses, because it's a shortening of an omnibus. Omnibuses? Maybe. I don't know the etymology of that, but I hope that's real. Anyway. Jonathan thought it would interest me to go into the Row for a while, so we sat down, but there were very few people there, and it was sad looking, desolate to see so many empty chairs. It made us think of the empty chair at home, so we got up and walked down Piccadilly. Jonathan was holding me by the arm, the way he used to in old days before I went to school. I felt it very improper, for you can't go on for some years teaching etiquette and decorum to other girls without the pedantry of it biting into yourself a bit. But it was Jonathan, and he was my husband, and we didn't know anybody who saw us, and we didn't care if they did, so on we walked. Greek coming in with the etymology online link to the word bus. Does it come from omnibus? Bus. Noun from 1832. Public street carriage. Originally a colloquial abbreviation of omnibus. The modern English noun is nothing but a Latin dative plural ending. To miss the bus, in the figurative sense of lose an opportunity, is from 1901 Australian English. The Oxford English Dictionary has a figurative miss the omnibus from 1886. Busman's holiday, leisure time spent doing what one does for a living, dates from 1893. It's probably a reference to London bus drivers riding the buses on their day off. Huh. Fascinating. So it does come from the shortening of omnibus. I've also never heard busman's holiday. I strictly avoid performing busman's holiday type work, which is why it takes me so long to debug stuff that is broken with the Discord bot, for example. Because I already do enough programming in my day-to-day, I don't need to sit there on a busman's holiday fixing something that's broken in my normal life. Anyway, that was actually really neat. Thank you for that link. I felt it very improper, the pedantry of it biting into you, so on we walked. I was looking at a very beautiful girl in a big cartwheel hat, sitting in a Victoria outside Giuliano's, when I felt Jonathan clench my arm so tight that he hurt me, and he said under his breath, "My God!"
I'm always anxious about Jonathan, for I fear that some nervous fit may upset him again. So I turned to him quickly and asked him what it was that disturbed him so. He was very pale, and his eyes seemed bulging out, as half in terror and half in amazement, while he gazed at a tall, thin man with a beaky nose and black mustache and pointed beard, who was also observing the pretty girl. He was looking at her so hard that he did not see either of us, and so I had a good view of him. His face was not a good face. It was hard, cruel, and sensual, and his big white teeth, that looked all the wider because his lips were so red, were pointed like an animal's. Jonathan kept staring at him till I was afraid he would notice. I feared he might take it ill. He looked so fierce and nasty. I asked Jonathan why he was disturbed, and he answered, evidently thinking that I knew as much about it as he did. Do you see who it is? No, dear, I don't know him. Who is it? His answer seemed to shock and thrill me, for it was said as if he did not know that it was to me, Mina, whom he was speaking. It's the man himself. The poor dear was evidently terrified at something, very greatly terrified even. I do believe that if he had not had me to lean on and to support him, he would have sunk down. He kept staring. A man came out of the shop with a small parcel and gave it to the lady, who then drove off. The dark man kept his eyes fixed on her, and when the carriage moved up Piccadilly, he followed in the same direction and hailed a hansom. Jonathan kept looking after him and said, as if to himself, I believe it is the Count, but he's grown young. If this be so, oh my God, if I only knew, if I only knew. He was distressing himself so much that I feared to keep his mind on the subject by asking him any questions, so I remained silent. I drew him away casually and quietly, while he was holding my arm, which came easily. We walked a little further, and then went in and sat for a while in the Green Park. It was a hot day in autumn, and there was a comfortable seat in a shady place. After a few minutes staring at nothing, Jonathan's eyes closed, and he went quietly into his sleep with his head on my shoulder. I thought it was the best thing for him, so I did not disturb him. In about 20 minutes he woke up and said to me quite cheerfully, Oh, Mina, have I been asleep? Oh, do forgive me for being so rude. Come, we'll have a cup of tea somewhere. He had evidently forgotten all about the dark stranger, as in his illness he had forgotten all that this episode had reminded him of. I don't like this lapsing into forgetfulness. It may make or continue some injury to his brain. I must not ask him, for fear I shall do more harm than good, but I must somehow learn the facts of his journey abroad. The time is come, I fear, when I must open that parcel and know what is written. Oh, Jonathan, you will, I know, forgive me if I do wrong, but it is for your own dear sake. Library's like, No, I am not a marketable plushie. Do not pick me up. Fine, fine. Anyway, later. A sad homecoming in every way. The house empty of the dear soul who was so good to us. Jonathan still pale and dizzy under a slight relapse of his malady. And now a telegram from Van Helsing, whoever he may be. You will be grieved to hear that Mrs. Westenra died 5 days ago, and that Lucy died the day before yesterday. They were both buried today. What a wealth of sorrow in a few words. Poor Mrs. Westenra, poor Lucy, gone, gone, never to return to us. And poor Arthur, to have such sweetness, and losing, and poor Arthur, to have lost such sweetness out of his life. God help us all to bear our troubles. Yeah? Are you gonna hassle me for pets right now? Do you have anything to say to the class? Do you have anything to say to the class, library? Yeah, thank you for telling us. Tell me more. I hope you all can see library there. He's very upset that I'm not petting him. Yeah, should I sit down and read so I can pet you? He's like, yes, pet me.
Love me.
Yeah. Okay. I, like all cat owners, am ruled by my little men's requirements. Let me see if I can adjust the mic for a moment. Stay put, like, right? Let me see if I can squish my mic into a more useful position here. Yeah. Well, I just told you, wait a moment. Are you paying attention? Yeah. Anyway, Dr. Seward's diary, 22nd September. It is all over. Arthur has gone back to Ring, and he has taken Quincy Morris with him. What a fine fellow is Quincy. I believe in my heart of hearts that he suffered as much about Lucy's death as any of us, but he bore himself through it like a moral Viking. If America can go on breeding men like that, she'll be a power in the world indeed. Van Helsing is lying down, having a rest preparatory to his journey. He goes over to Amsterdam tonight, but he says he returns tomorrow night, that he only wants to make some arrangements which can only be made personally. He is to stop with me, then, if he can. He says he has work to do in London, which may take him some time. Poor old fellow, I feel the strain of that past week has broken down even his iron strength. All the time of the burial he was, I could see, putting together some horrible restraint on himself. When it was all over, we were standing beside Arthur, who, poor fellow, was speaking of his part in the operation, where his blood had been transfused to his Lucy's veins. I could see Van Helsing's face grow white and purple by turns. Arthur was saying that he felt since then as if they two had really been married, and that she was his wife in the sight of God. None of us said a word of the other operations, and none of us ever shall. Arthur and Quincy went away together to the station, and Van Helsing and I came on here. The moment we were alone in the carriage, he gave way to a regular fit of hysterics. He has denied to me since that it was hysterics, and insisted that it was only his sense of humor asserting itself under very terrible conditions. He laughed until he cried, and I had to draw down the blinds lest anyone would see us and misjudged. Then he cried till he laughed again, and then laughed and cried together just as a woman does. I tried to be stern with him, as one is to a woman under the circumstances, but it had no effect. Men and women are so different in manifestations of nervous strength or weakness. Then, when his face grew grave and stern again, I asked him why his mirth, and why at such a time. His reply was in a way characteristic of him, for it was logical and forceful and mysterious. He said, "You don't comprehend, friend John. Do not think that I am not sad, though I laugh. See, I have cried even when the laugh did choke me, but no more think that I am all sorry when I cry, for the laugh just had come just the same. And keep it always with you, that laughter who knocks at your door and says, 'May I come in?' It is not the true laughter. No. He is a king, and he comes when and how he likes. He asks no person. He chooses no time of sustainability. He says, 'I am here. Behold an example. I grieved my heart out for that young, sweet girl. I gave my blood for her, though I am old and worn. I give my time, my skill, my sleep. I let my other sufferers want, so that she may have all. And yet I can laugh at her very grave, laugh when the clay from the spade of the sexton drops upon her coffin and says thud, thud, to my heart, till it send back the blood from my cheek. My heart bleeds for that poor boy, that dear boy, so the age of mine own. The boy, I had been blessed that he lived, with his hair and eyes the same. There, you know now why I love him so. And yet when he says things to touch my husband heart to the quick and make my father heart yearn to him, as to no other man, not even to you, friend John, for we're more level in experiences than father and son. Yet even at such moment, King Laugh, he come to me and shout and bellow in my ear, 'Here I am,' till the blood come dance back, and bring some of the sunshine that he carry with him to my cheek.
Oh, friend John, it is a strange world, a sad world, a world full of miseries and woes and troubles. And yet, when King Laugh comes, he makes them all dance to the tune he plays. Bleeding hearts and dry bones of the churchyard, uh, and tears that burn as they fall, all dance together to the music that he makes with that smileless mouth of his. And believe me, friend John, that he is good to come and kind. We men and women are like ropes drawn tight with strain that pulls us different ways. Then tears come, and like rain on the ropes, they brace us up, and perhaps the strain becomes too great, and we break. But King Laugh, he comes like the sunshine, and he eases off the strain again, and we bear to go on with our labor and what it may be. I did not like to wound him by pretending not to see his idea, but as I did not yet understand the cause of his laughter, I asked him. As he answered me, his face grew stern, and he said in quite a different tone, "Oh, here's the grim irony of it all. This so lovely lady, garlanded with flowers that looked so fair as life, till one by one we wondered if she were truly dead. She laid in that fine marble house in the lovely churchyard, where rest so many of her kin, laid there with the mother who loved her, and whom she loved, and that sacred bell going toll, 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 so sad and slow, and those holy men with the white garments of the angel pretending to read books, yet all the time their eyes never on the page, and all of us with a bowed head, and all for what? She's dead, so, is it not?"
Well, for the life of me, Professor, I can't see anything to laugh at and all that. Your explanation makes it a harder puzzle than before, but even if the burial service was comic, what about poor Art and his trouble? Why, his heart was simply breaking.
Just so. Said he not that the transfusion of his blood to her veins had made her truly his bride?
Yes, and it was a sweet and comforting idea for him.
Quite so. But there was difficulty, friend John. If so that, then what about the others? Then this so sweet maid is a polyandrist, and me with my poor wife dead to me, but alive by church's law, though no wits, all gone, even I, who am faithful husband to this now no wife, am bigamist.
I just don't see where the joke comes in here, either, I said, and I didn't feel particularly pleased with him for saying such things. He laid his hand on my arm and said,
Friend John, forgive me if I pain. I showed not my feeling to others when it would wound, but only to you, my old friend, whom I can trust. If you could have looked into my very heart when I want to laugh, if you could have done so when the laugh arrives, if you could do so now when King Laugh has packed up his crown and what all that is to him, for he goes far, far away from me for a long, long time, maybe you would perhaps pity me the most of all.
I was touched by the tenderness of his tone and asked why.
Because I know.
And now we are all scattered, and for many a long day loneliness will sit over our roofs with brooding wings. Lucy lies in the tomb of her kin, a lordly death house in a lonely churchyard away from teeming London, where the air is fresh and the sun rises over Hampstead Hill, and where wild flowers grow of their own accord. So I can finish this diary, and God only knows if I shall ever begin another. If I do, or if I even open this again, it will be to deal with different people and different themes, for here at the end, where the romance of my life is told, ere I go back to take up the thread of my life work, I say sadly and without hope, Finis. I'm not gonna lie, I completely lost the thread of what Van Helsing was saying there. He was making some kind of like elaborate metaphor about laughing sneaking up on you with some gallows humor, and like I have a pretty reasonable guess why he is seeing gallows humor in what's happening, but like I still completely lost the the thread that he was making there. I cannot imagine someone without the knowledge of the reader here, someone as the character in the story is just boggled. Completely boggled. Alright, we move next to a clipping from the Westminster Gazette on the 25th of September. A Hampstead mystery! The neighborhood of Hampstead is just at present exercised with a series of events which seem to run on lines parallel to those of what was known to the writers of the headlines as the Kensington Horror, or the Stabbing Woman, or the Woman in Black. He was telling a story, tried to add a joke, and ultimately gave up and tried to get back to the story, but he gave up too. Everyone's just nodding at him like they're still following. I love that the way that was written also conveys that to the reader. They're like, uh-huh, uh-huh, uh-huh. Like, that's really masterful. That not only are the characters that are listening to him like, uh-huh, 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 we as the reader are also a little bit like, uh-huh, uh-huh, uh-huh. That's great. Love that. Anyway, the stabbing woman, the woman in black. Uh, During the past 2 or 3 days, several cases have occurred of young children straying from home or neglecting to return from their playing on the heath. In all these cases, the children were too young to give any properly intelligible account of themselves, but the consensus of the excuses is that they had been with a bloofer lady. It has always been late in the evening when they have been missed, and on 2 occasions the children have not been found until early the following morning. It's generally supposed in the neighborhood that as the first child gave his reason for being away, that a bloofer lady had asked him to come for a walk. The others had picked up the phrase and used it as occasion served. This is the more natural, as the favorite game of the little ones at present is luring themselves and each other away by wiles. A correspondent writes us that to see some of the tiny tots pretending to be the bloofer lady is supremely funny. Some of our characterists might, he says, take a lesson in the irony of grotesque by comparing the reality and the picture. It is only in accordance with general principles of human nature that the bloofer lady should be the popular role at these alfresco performances. Our correspondent naively says that even Ellen Terry could not be so winningly attractive as some of these grubby-faced little children pretend and even imagine themselves to be. There is, however, possibly a serious side to the question, for some of the children, indeed all who have been missed at night, have been slightly torn or wounded in the throat. The wounds seem such as might be made by a rat or a small dog, and although of not much importance individually, would tend to show that whatever animal inflicts them has a system or method of its own. It's right here. It's right here. The police of the division have been instructed to keep a sharp lookout for straying children, especially when very young, in and around Hampstead Heath, and for any stray dog which may be about. Another clipping from the Westminster Gazette on the 25th of September. Extra special. The Hampstead Horror. Another child has been injured. The bloofer lady. We've just received intelligence that another child missed last night was discovered late in the morning under a furze bush at the Shooter's Hill side of Hampstead Heath, which is perhaps less frequented than the other parts. It has the same tiny wounds in the throat as has been noticed in other cases. It was terribly weak and looked quite emaciated. It too, when partially restored, had the same common story to tell of being lured away by the bloofer lady. Okay. again, this is really like genuinely fascinating to read as someone who's, aware of the broad strokes of Dracula as a concept and very aware of like, vampires and how they work. Oh, cool. I was checking my chat and making sure nothing was on fire. Niji Tan has escaped from purgatory. Uh, I hope they have learned their lesson about letting people draw things on their stream. Uh, because that ended poorly for them, and I'm glad to see them back. Anyway, uh, let's dive into chapter 14 with an excerpt from Mina Harker's journal. On the 23rd of September. Jonathan is better after a bad night. I'm so glad that he has plenty of work to do, for that keeps his mind off the terrible things, and oh, I'm rejoiced that he is not now weighed down with the responsibility of his new position. I knew he would be true to himself, and now how proud I am to see my Jonathan rising to the height of his advancement and keeping pace in all ways with the duties that come upon him. He will be away all day till late, for he said that he could not lunch at home. My household work is done, so I shall take his foreign journal and lock myself up in his room and read it. That would be a good time to cut back to the first episode of Paper Cuts, where we were reading Dracula, because almost the entire first episode was Jonathan Harker's secret shorthand journal that is getting read by Mina right now. I'll give you a moment to pause, cut back if you so choose, maybe look up some Spark Notes if you don't particularly want to go listen to the whole episode. Just make sure you're caught up. It's a good number of chapters early on. I'll maybe put something in the show notes. At the bare minimum, I'll link to the appropriate episodes. Okay, you back? Good. Apologies to the live viewers, but that's not nearly enough time for you all. But you've been here. You know what happened. Anyway, 24th September. I hadn't the heart to write last night. That terrible record of Jonathan's upset me so. Poor dear, how he must have suffered, whether it be true or only imagination. I wonder if there is any truth in it at all. Did he get his brain fever and write all those terrible things, or had he some cause for it all? I suppose I shall never know, for I dare not open the subject to him, and yet that man we saw yesterday, he seemed quite certain of him. Poor fellow. I suppose it was the funeral that upset him and set his mind back on some train of thought. He believes it all himself. I remember now, on our wedding day, he said, unless some solemn duty come upon me to go back to the bitter hours, asleep or awake, mad or sane. There seems to be, through it all, some thread of continuity. That fearful Count was coming to London. If it should be, and he came to London with his teeming millions, well, there may be a solemn duty, and if it come, we must not shirk from it. I shall be prepared. I shall get my typewriter this very hour and begin transcribing. Then we shall be ready for other eyes if required, and if it be wanted, then perhaps, if I am ready, poor Jonathan may not be upset, for I can speak for him and never let him be troubled or worried with it at all. If ever Jonathan gets quite over the nervousness, he may want to tell me of it all, and I can ask him questions and find out things and see how I may comfort him. A letter from Van Helsing to Mrs. Harker, 24th of September. In confidence. Dear Madam, I pray you to pardon my writing, in that I am so far friend that as I sent you the sad news of Miss Lucy's Westenra's death, by the kindness of Lord Godalming, I am empowered to read her letters and papers, for I am deeply concerned about certain matters vitally important. In them I find some letters from you which show how you were great friends, and how you love her so. Oh, Madam Mina, by that love I implore you to help me.
It is for the other's good that I ask, to redress great wrong, and to lift much and terrible troubles that may be more great than you know. May it be that I can see you. You can trust me. I am friend of Dr. John Sward and of Lord Godalming, that was Arthur of Miss Lucy. I must keep it private for the present from all. I should come to Exeter to see you at once if you tell me. I am privileged to come, and where and when. I implore your pardon, madam. I have read your letters to poor Lucy, and know how good you are, and how your husband suffers. So I pray you, if it may be, enlighten him not, lest it may harm. Again, your pardon, and forgive me. Van Helsing. Telegram from Mrs. Harker to Van Helsing. 25th September. Come today by 10:15. Train if you can catch it. Can see you at any time you call. Wilhelmina. Like, listen, you could not name a child Wilhelmina, or Wilhelm for that matter at this point, just for the sheer factor of the Wilhelm scream. But I love that this big over-dramatic name being Wilhelmina just shortens down to that very pleasant Mina. In the same way that Desdemona, which I'm likely saying incorrectly, because I've only read it on paper, shortens down to Des. You know, I just like that, or Mona for that matter. I don't know. I'm a big fan in theory of names that are very long, and then like you just pick a chunk out of it, and that's the name you normally go by. And so then, like, in very formal settings, someone can address you by your long name, and it feels very like, oh, my full name, am I in trouble? You know, it's just very dramatic. I'm a big fan. For example, this is a very obscure example, but one of my D&D characters who is like vaguely a noble. He's a bard and he's very snooty. His name is Milris Holostasia Dodson, and I'm pretty sure there's a second middle name that I'm forgetting in the middle there. And I was like, that just sounds very pretentious, which suits the character very well. But I digress. I could talk about my D&D campaign and my characters I've played previously all day, but I won't. That's not what Papercut's for. Let's read more of Mina Harker's journal. 25th September. I cannot help feeling terribly excited as the time draws near for the visit of Dr. Van Helsing, for somehow I expect that it will throw some light upon Jonathan's sad experience, and as he attended poor dear Lucy in her last illness, he can tell me all about her. That is the reason of his coming. It is concerning Lucy and her sleepwalking, and not about Jonathan. Then I shall never know the real truth now. How silly I am. That awful journal gets hold of my imagination and tinges everything with something of its own color. Of course it's about Lucy. That habit came back to the poor dear, and that awful night on the cliff must have made her ill. I had almost forgotten in my own affairs how ill she was afterwards. She must have told him of her sleepwalking adventure on the cliff, and that I knew all about it. And now he wants me to tell him what she knows so that he may understand. I hope I did right in not saying anything of it to Mrs. Westenra. I should never forgive myself if any act of mine, were it even a negative one, brought harm on poor dear Lucy. I hope, too, Dr. Van Helsing will not blame me. I have had so much trouble and anxiety of late that I feel I cannot bear more just at present. I suppose a cry does us all good at times, clears the air, as the other rains do. Perhaps it was reading the journal yesterday that upset me. Then Jonathan went away this morning to stay away from me a whole day and night, the first time since we have parted, since our marriage. I do hope the dear fellow will take care of himself, and that nothing will occur to upset him. It is 2 o'clock, and the doctor will be here soon now. I shall say nothing of Jonathan's journal unless he asks me. I am so glad that I have typewritten out my own journal, so that in case he asks me about Lucy, I can hand it to him. It will save much questioning. Okay, so she's done what she mentioned potentially doing to Jonathan's shorthand journal earlier.
to her own shorthand journal, in which she has transcribed it out from the shorthand using a typewriter into longhand. Honestly, shorthand is very fascinating to me. It's essentially like it is the analog pen and paper equivalent of a stenographer's corded keyboard, in that you are just essentially transcribing like phonemes onto the page to build words. It's very neat, and I actually would not complain about learning shorthand. Although, given my standard handwriting, it probably would be illegible even to me. But I know there are a few books on learning shorthand uh, back home that I could, avail myself of if I did not want to just find find tutorials online. And I know there's several approaches to shorthand. I don't know them off the top of my head, but I do remember reading about the pros and cons of several different types of shorthand. It essentially just it's mostly a matter of taste and which one you learned first. But I would love to be able to learn shorthand. One of the many things that I would love to learn, if I had an unlimited volume of time to do so, not limited to shorthand, beekeeping, proper sewing and embroidery, fabric making, paper making, journal binding. Um, what else could be fun? Uh, Baking beyond bread and simple cakes. Uh, I would like to properly learn guitar instead of just downloading the skill into my hands for a month or two. Having a better grasp on piano would avail me a lot of skill. Uh, Piano could lead very easily into deeper music theory. I have a lot of like muscle memory music theory in my brain. I don't have proper music theory training. I haven't for years. I can read music and that's it. Anyway, as you all can tell, I would love to have unlimited time to just sit there and learn my hobbies. And whether that will ever come true, we shall see. Who knows if you all latch on to this well enough, and I'm making some kind of funds off of this instead of having to go to a day job. I could use those 8 hours to improve the stream, and by improving the stream, pick up my weird my weird hobbies. Anyway, I've digressed. More journal. Later. He's come and gone. What a strange meeting, and how it all makes my head whirl round. I feel like one in a dream. Can it be all possible, or even a part of it? If I had not read Jonathan's journal first, I should never have accepted even a possibility. Poor dear Jonathan. How he must have suffered. Please the dear God, all this may not upset him again. I shall try to save him from it, but it may be even a consolation and a help to him, terrible though it be, and awful in its consequences, to know for certain that his eyes and ears and brain did not deceive him, and that it is all true. It may be that it is the doubt which haunts him, that when the doubt is removed, no matter which, waking or dreaming, may prove the truth, he will be more satisfied and better able to bear the shock. Dr. Van Helsing must be a good man, as well as a clever one, if he is Arthur's friend and Dr. Seward's, and if they brought him all the way from Holland to look after Lucy. I feel from having seen him that he is good and kind, of a noble nature. When he comes tomorrow, I shall ask him about Jonathan, and then, please God, all this sorrow and anxiety may lead to a good end. I used to think that I would like to practice interviewing. Jonathan's friends on the Exeter News told him that memory was everything in such work, that you must be able to put down exactly almost every word spoken, even if you had to refine some of it afterwards. Here was a rare interview. I shall try to record it verbatim. It was 2:30 when the knock came. I took my courage à deux mains and waited. In a few minutes, Mary opened the door and announced Dr. Van Helsing. I rose and bowed, and he came toward me, a man of medium weight, strongly built, with his shoulders set back over a broad, deep chest, and a neck well balanced on the trunk, as the head is on the neck. The poise of the head strikes one as indicative of thought and power. The head is noble, well-sized, broad, and large behind the ears. The face, clean-shaven, shows a hard, square chin, a large, resolute, mobile mouth, a good-sized nose, rather straight, but with quick, sensitive nostrils that seem to broaden as the big, bushy brows come down and the mouth tightens. The forehead is broad and fine, and rising at first, almost straight, then sloping back above two bumps or ridges wide apart, such a forehead that the reddish hair could not possibly tumble over it, but falls naturally back and to the sides. Big dark blue eyes are set widely apart, and are quick and tender, or stern with a man's moods. Dracula, indeed, is what we are reading. Zeus? I don't know what you were aiming for with the Zeus command there, Gariki, but, hello, RNL. Glad to have you here. We are indeed reading Dracula. Hello. Yes. Hi, Library. Library wanted to say hi as well. How was, Weird Horse VN? I think that's what you were reading. I had poked in my head and like for 5 seconds before paper cuts started. You were reading the one with like the horse suddenly has a human head and is now seducing their former trainer, I think. The one that like everyone saw the ads for and went, "That's especially weird." I firmly agree with them. And I'm a lover of weird VNs. So, uh yeah, we are reading Dracula, and once again, I must impress that you had to quit. Fair enough. Once again, I must impress that the Dracula you really can drop in at any time. It's very much immune to the oh, I haven't heard the rest of the book effect that we all run into. Yeah, that's not like I hate to say it, that's not the strangest Vienna I've ever heard of, and I know everybody cites Hatoful Boyfriend, like, oh, you're dating birds, you're dating pigeons, that's weird. I'm like, yeah, that is pretty weird. And so is that horse one, but also there's like, personally, I find Panzermädels a little weirder. It's very strange that you're dating World War II tanks, and like, they are referred to as having tank characteristics. Sir, thank you. I would pick you up, but you jumped down as soon as I stood up, so you clearly recognize there are not to be beans on the table. Yeah, like, I feel Panzermädels is a little weirder, but like, it's still a pretty high bar to get over the horse VN. Or like, there's like a whole series of like idol anime and VNs. Oh, pick him up. Raz is bloodthirsty to see those beans. Where was I? There was a whole like idol anime that also has a VN attached to it that is I love when VNs get intentionally weird. It's very fun. It is all about like famous racing horses, and like because horse betting is huge in Japan, it sells really really well, and it has an incredibly rabid fan base. What's the other really weird one? There's like in the same line as Panzermädels, there is one where you date like World War II era biplanes or something. Like you date like military planes. There's like can you tell I'm a little weirded out by all the like object girls ones? They're a little weird. Listen. I know most of my audience was initially here for Asagao Academy. If you take Asagao Academy out of the context that I was originally reading it in, and you just read the premise to somebody, it is very weird. You date teenage versions of a popular group of YouTube personalities, uh, set in a fictitious Japanese high school, wherein, like, every harem anime trope is happening at once. I love Asagawa Academy to death. It is so strange on paper, and it is incredible that it works so well. Oh, and also one of the secret routes, spoilers, one of the secret routes has you dating a robot bird and going full yandere on it, and one of the other secret routes has you not dating anybody and instead just meshing yourself into the rival group as a friend. Like, Asakawa Academy is wild. And some of the stretch goals that didn't get met are even wilder. Like, there was gonna be a whole subplot about, uh there's a whole subplot that gets vaguely hinted at about, like, several of the characters being self-aware of the medium in which they are in. Like, Mai blatantly calls you a main character several times. Um, the the dean of the high school, like, refers to you being on a specific route and is surprised to see you going after that route. Like, there are several meta elements that, if the Kickstarter had gotten even more money and the game had ever finished, because the game probably would not have finished if they met the stretch goal for that subplot, because that subplot was after rewriting the entire game to be completely gender neutral for Hana, which would never have gotten finished per the devs. Uh, yeah, it it gets weird, and if the farther you dig into the game, the weirder it gets, and I love it to death. Anyway, uh, at least they honestly lean into the weirdness. I read some Harlequin romance mangas that are just as unrealistic. Lean the slop around in the pig pen and hug the fence post with great affection. That's a sentence. That's a sentence to read. They slop around in the pig pen and hug the fence post with great affection. Uh, that's a sentence to read out of context, especially knowing that it is a horseman. Anyway, yeah. Uh, I agree with you. There's some Harlequin romance mangas that really need to lean in. Like, they are working with such a strange set of ideas that they need to, like, take a scene or two to lean in and be like, this is weird. This is really weird, and we need to address it. Like, take, like, a chapter or two to just look at the camera and be like, this is weird. This is so weird. Like, have someone outside of the plot stumble into the plot for a chapter or two. Let them be the POV character for a chapter or two and stare at the camera and point out how weird what is happening is happening. I would love it. Does it need to happen often? No. But if you're working with a really weird premise, I encourage it highly. Anyway, it's too late to pick up Magnus now. He's comfy and he has forgotten about the concept of consequences. Anyway, where I've completely derailed from where I was. How long is this chapter? Because it's also time for BRB. How much longer is this chapter? That says 403. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, there is so much of this chapter left, clearly, that I'm just gonna go to the next, like, journal spot, and then we're gonna call intermission. So, give me a moment to get back to where I was. Boop, boop, boop. A little further. Come on, one more. Thank you. It's come and gone to be certain that his eyes and ears. We can be dreaming, tell the truth. Is good and kind. Okay. Courage à deux mains. We have described Dr. Van Helsing's face. He said to me,
Miss Harker, is it not?
I bowed assent.
And that was Miss Mina Murray?
Again, I assented.
It is Mina Murray that I came to see, that was friend of that poor dear child, Lucy Westenra. Madam Mina, it is on account of the dead that I come.
Sir, you could have no better claim on me than that you were a friend and helper of Lucy Westenra. And I held out my hand. He took it and said tenderly,
Oh, Madam Mina, I knew that the friend of the poor lily girl must be good, but I had yet to learn.
He finished his speech with a courtly bow. That arm out probably makes it less cowardly, but we take those. I asked him what it was that he wanted to see me about, so he at once began.
I have read your letters to Miss Lucy. Forgive me, but I had to begin to inquire somewhere, and there was none to ask. I know that you were with her at Whitby. She sometimes kept a diary. You need not look surprised, Madam Mina. It was begun after you had left, and was in imitation of you. And in that diary she traces, by inference, certain things to sleepwalking, in which she puts down that you saved her. In great perplexity, then, I come to you, and ask you, out of your so much kindness, to tell me all of that you can remember.
I can tell you, I think, Dr. Van Helsing, all about it.
Ah, then you have good memory for facts, for details? It is not always so with young ladies.
No, Doctor, but I wrote it all down at the time. I can show it to you if you like.
No, Madam Mina, I will be grateful. You will do me much favor.
I could not resist the temptation of mystifying him a bit. I suppose it is in some of the taste of the original apple that remains still in our mouths, so I handed him the shorthand diary. He took it with a grateful bow and said,
May I read it?
If you wish, I answered as demurely as I could. He opened it, and for an instant his face fell. Then he stood up and bowed.
Oh, you clever woman. I knew long that Mr. Jonathan was a fan of much thankfulness. But his wife, see, had all the good things. And you will not so much honor me and help me as to read it for me? Alas, I know not the shorthand.
By the time my little joke was over, and I was almost ashamed, I took the typewritten copy from my work-basket and handed it to him.
Forgive me. I could not help it, but I had been thinking that it was of dear Lucy that you wished to ask, and so that you might not have time to wait, not on my account, but because I know your time must be precious, I've written out on the typewriter for you.
He took it, and his eyes glistened.
You are so good. May I read it now? I may want to ask you some things when I have read. By all means, read it over whilst I order lunch, and you can ask me questions while we eat.
He bowed and settled himself in a chair with his back to the light and became absorbed in the papers while I went to see after lunch, chiefly in order that he might not be disturbed. When I came back, I found him walking hurriedly up and down the room, his face all ablaze with excitement. He rushed up to me and took me by both hands.
Madam Mina, how can I say what I owe to you? This paper is as sunshine. It opens the gate to me. I'm dazed, I'm dazzled with so much light, and yet clouds roll in behind the light every time. But that you do not, cannot comprehend. Oh, but I'm grateful to you. You're so clever woman. Madam, he said this very solemnly, if ever Abraham Van Helsing can help you, do anything for you or yours, I trust that you will let me know. It will be a pleasure, and a delight if I ever serve you as a friend. As a friend, but all I have learned, all I can ever do, shall be for you and those you love. There are darknesses in life, and there are lights. You are one of the lights. You will have happy life and good life, and your husband will be blessed in you. Doctor, praise me too much, and you don't know me. Not know you, I, who am old, and who have studied all my life, men and women. I who have made my specialty the brain, and all that belongs to him, and all that follows from him. And I've read your diary, that you have so goodly written for me, and which breathes out truth in every line. I who have read your so sweet letter to poor Lucy of your marriage and your trust, not know you. Oh, Madam Mina, and good women tell all their lives, and day by day, and hour by hour, and minute by minute, such things that angels have read, and we men who wish to know have something of us angels' eyes. Your husband is noble nature. You are noble too, for you trust, and trust cannot be where there is mean nature. And your husband, tell me of him. Is he quite well? Is all that fever gone? Is he strong and hearty?
I saw an opening here to ask him about Jonathan, so I said.
He was almost recovered, but he's been greatly upset by Mr. Hawkins' death. Oh, yes, I know. I have read your last 2 letters. I suppose this upset him, for when we were in town on Thursday last, he had a sort of shock. A shock, and after a brain fever so soon. That was not good. What kind of a shock was it? He thought he saw someone who recalled something terrible, something which led to his brain fever.
And here the whole thing seemed to overwhelm me in a rush. The pity for Jonathan, the horror which he experienced, the whole fearful mystery of his diary, and the fear that has been brooding over me ever since, all came in a tumult. I suppose I was hysterical, for I threw myself on my knees and held up my hands to him and implored him to make my husband well again. He took my hands and raised me up and made me sit on the sofa and sat by me. He held my hand in this and said to me with oh, such infinite sweetness, "My life is a barren and lonely one, and so full of work that I have not much time for friendships. But since I have been summoned here by my good friend Jonathan Saward, I've known so many good people and seen such nobility that I feel more than ever, and it has grown with my advancing years, the loneliness of my life. Believe me, then, that I come here full of respect for you, and you've given me hope. Hope not in what I'm seeking of, but that there are good women left to make this life happy, good women whose lives and whose truths may make good lesson for the true children that are to be. I am glad that I may be here some of use to you. For if your husband suffer, he suffers within the range of my study and experience. I promise you that I will gladly do all for him that I can, all to make his life strong and manly and your life a happy one. And you must eat. You are overwrought and perhaps over anxious. Your husband Jonathan would not like to see you so pale, and would be like not where he love is to not be his good. Therefore, for his sake, you must eat and smile. You have told me all about Lucy. Now we shall not speak of it, lest in distress. I shall stay in Exeter tonight, for I want to think much over what you have told me, and when I have thought, I will ask you questions, if I may. And then, too, you will tell me of your husband Jonathan's troubles, so far as you can, but not yet. You must eat now, and afterwards you shall tell me all. After lunch, when we went back to the drawing-room, he said to me,
"Now tell me all about him."
When it came to speaking to this great learned man, I began to fear that he would think me a weak fool and Jonathan a madman. That journal is all so strange, and I hesitated to go on. But he was so sweet and kind, and he'd promised to help, and I trusted him, so I said,
"Dr. Van Helsing, what I have to tell you is so queer that you must not laugh at me or my husband. I have been, since yesterday, in a sort of fever of doubt. You must be kind to me, and not think me foolish that I've ever half believed some very strange things."
He reassured me by his manner, as well as his words, when he said,
"Oh, my dear, if you only know how strange is the matter regarding which I'm here, it is you who would laugh. I have learned not to think little of my one's belief, no matter how strange it be. I have tried to keep an open mind, and it is not the ordinary things of life that would close it, but the strange things, the extraordinary things, the things that make one doubt if they be mad or sane." Thank you 1,000 times. You've taken a weight off my mind. If you will let me, I shall give you a paper to read. It is long, but I have typewritten it out. It will tell you my trouble and Jonathan's. It is the copy of his journal when abroad, and all that happened. I dare not say anything of it. You will read for yourself and judge, and then when I see you, perhaps you will be very kind and tell me what you think." "I promise," he said as I gave him the papers. "I shall in the morning, as soon as I can, come to see you and your husband, if I may. Jonathan will be here at 11:30. You must come to lunch with us and see him then. You would catch the quick 3:34 train, which will leave you at Paddington before 8.
He was surprised at my knowledge of the trains offhand, but he does not know that I've made up all the trains to and from Exeter, so that I may help Jonathan in case he is in a hurry. So he took the papers and went away, and I sit here thinking I don't know what. So next up is a letter written by hand from Van Helsing to Mrs. Harker. But we will dive into that post intermission. That means we will be right back. Whoop. We'll be right back. It usually is about 15 minutes, mostly consists of me grabbing water with the camera and microphone off. It also consists of double checking on my boys. They've been in and out of frame tonight, so that's less pressing for me, but I would heartily suggest you give your pets some love from me. I would appreciate if you tag me in any photos of you all doing so. Grab some water yourself. If you've been sitting this whole time, I heartily suggest standing up and stretching your legs. If you've been standing this whole time, perhaps sit down and rest yourself for a little while. If you have any medications, now is a great time to take them, provided you're supposed to take them now-ish. We'll be back in about 15. I will see you all in a few. Don't panic. There's not going to be any sound. I'll be back with more Dracula soon enough.
Okay, we should be good. Me quadruple check with studio mode off that everything's fine other than those scroll bars. Pay no attention to the scroll bars behind the curtain. Everything's fine. Lighting. Thanks. How do we look? Definitely should not leave the water bottle that far into frame. I did not pay attention to some of my advice. I did not fill my water bottle, so let me do that real quick. I was too busy stretching my legs. That ought to do, and if it's not enough, I'll stop. You know? It's very easy. Anyway, let us... Oh, let us continue with the letter by hand from Van Helsing to Mrs. Harker, 25th September, 6 o'clock. Dear Madam Mina, I have read your husband's so wonderful diary. You may sleep without doubt. Strange and terrible as it is true. I will pledge my life on it. It may be worse for others, but for him and for you there is no dread. He is a noble fellow, and let me tell you from experience of men that one who would do as he did in going down that wall and to that room, aye, and going a second time, is not one to be injured in permanence by a shock. His brain and his heart is all right. This I swear before I have even seen him, so be at rest. I shall have much to ask him of other things. I am blessed that today I come to see you, for I have learned all at once so much that again I am dazzled more than ever, and I must think yours, the ever faithful, Abraham Van Helsing. A letter from Mrs. Harker to Van Helsing, 25th September, 6:30 p.m. My dear Van Helsing, 1,000 thanks for your kind letter, which has taken a great weight off my mind. And yet, if it be true, what terrible things there are in the world, and what an awful thing if that man, that monster, really be in London. I fear to think. I have this moment, whilst writing, had a wire from Jonathan, saying that he leaves by the 6:25 tonight from Lancaston, and will be here at 10:18, so that I shall have no fear tonight. Will you, therefore, instead of lunching with us, please come to breakfast at 8 o'clock, if this be not too early for you? You can get away, if you are in a hurry, by the 10:30 train, which will bring you to Paddington by 2:35. Do not answer this, as I shall take it that if I do not hear, you will come to breakfast. Believe me, your faithful and grateful friend, Mina Harker. Okay, so the train timing book that Dracula was reading in Act 1 apparently is coming back into importance because Mina knows all the train times. Very specific. Jonathan Harker's journal. The 26th September. I thought never to write in this diary again, but the time has come. When I got home last night, Mina had supper ready, and when we had supped, she told me of Van Helsing's visit, and of her having given him the 2 diaries copied out, and of how anxious she's been about me. She showed me in the doctor's letter that all I wrote down was true. It seems to have made a new man of me. It was the doubt as to the reality of the whole thing that had knocked me over. I felt impotent, and in the dark, and distrustful. But now that I know, I am not afraid, even of the Count. He has succeeded after all, then, in his design of getting to London, and it was he that I saw. He has gotten younger. Van Helsing is the man to unmask him and hunt him out, if he's anything like what Mina says. We sat late and talked it all over. Mina is dressing, and I shall call at the hotel in a few minutes and bring him over. He was, I think, surprised to see me. When I came into the room where he was and introduced myself, he took me by the shoulder and turned my face round to the light and said, after a sharp scrutiny, Madam Mina has told me you were ill, that you had had a shock. It was funny to hear my wife called Madam Mina by the kindly, strong-faced old man. I smiled and said, Yes, I was ill. I have had a shock, but you have cured me already. And how? By your... Oh, bless you, Magnus. Thank you for your sneeze. You got any more? He usually sneezes in twos and threes, so we'll take a moment to read chat. I only read this book once through, enjoying your reading so much so many years later. I'm glad you're enjoying it. Dracula is one that I have been meaning to read for many, many years. Uh, just generally, because I love, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein Modern Prometheus, the original Frankenstein, and I'm like, oh man, I love vampires conceptually. They're so fun as a concept. So I've been waiting to read Dracula. I agree with Kebo's emote there. Word's fun. Word's fun. That bright blue text does not read very well on either my phone or the OBS chat, so I can't tell what it actually says. But word's fun is the name of the emote, so I agree. Word's fun. Uh, yeah, I've been meaning to read Dracula for a long time. Oh, it just says words are fun. I'm glad it is literal. Uh, where was I? Yeah, I was originally planning on this in October, and then Dracula Daily went off like a bomb on Tumblr, and I went, ooh, Dracula though. What is this? An emote for ants? I agree with you. It's really hard to make text in emotes very legible. It has to be real big, because the emotes come out about this big, you know? It's very hard. How has Van Helsing cured our dear friend Jonathan, though? By your letter to Mina last night. I was in doubt, and then everything took hue of unreality. I did not know what to trust, even the evidence of my own senses. Not knowing what to trust, I did not know what to do, and so had only to keep on working in what hitherto had been the groove of my life. The groove ceased to avail me, and I mistrusted myself. Doctor, don't you know what it is to doubt everything, even yourself? No, you don't. You couldn't with eyebrows like yours. He seemed pleased and laughed as he said, uh, so, you are a physiognomist. I learn more here with each hour. I am with so much pleasure coming to you to breakfast. And oh, sir, you will pardon praise from an old man, but you are blessed in your wife. I would listen to him going on praising Mina for a day, so I simply nodded and stood silent. Kebo, explain, words are fun, please. Kebo has been summoned. Words are fun? Thank you for your vital explanation, Kebo. Uh, Glad to have you here now that we are not actively reading Radio Planet and activating your brain, because Radio Planet has the same. One of the characters in Radio Planet is named Kebo, so poor Kebo 3 here was having a time of it. Anyway, I simply nodded and stood silent was where we left off. She is one of God's own women, fashioned by his own hand to show us men and other women that there is a heaven where we can enter, that its light can be here on earth. So true, so sweet, so noble, so little an egoist. And that, let me tell you, is much in this age, so skeptical and selfish. And you, sir, I've read all the letters to your poor Miss Lucy, and some of them speak of you, so I know you since some days from the knowing of others, but I have seen your true self since last night. You will give me hand, will you not? And let us be friends for all of our lives. We shook hands, and he was so earnest and so kind that it made me quite choked up. And now, may I ask you for some more help? I have a great task to do, and at the beginning is to know. You can help me here. Can you tell me what went on before your going to Transylvania? Later on, I may ask more help, and of a different kind, but at first, this will do. A streamer I know has a fun little thing in their raid that says,
in their raid video that says games are fun, and another one I know often says words are hard. I read and think they're fun. Words are fun. Words can be hard. Uh, games are hard. Games are hard. Games are hard could be an emote here. Let's be real. If I ever hit affiliate, games are hard could 100% be an emote here. Uh, because I tend to bonk into the concrete wall on emotes. Oh, are those Fursona hands clapping? Whose emote is that? That's cute. Doog clapping. Cute. Very cute. Games are words? I mean, games are words on Monday night when we play tabletop games. Yes. Uh, bonk. But yeah, Monday night, as a friendly reminder, is tabletop RPG time or table cam time. I may have to adjust the table cam time to allow not tabletop RPG things. Uh, Either way, we put on the table cam and we play tabletop RPGs for a while. Last time we had one, we did some work on my Monster of the Week campaign. That was fun. We've been playing some really good ones. Standouts are Wordle is just a game about words. Wordle. Unfortunately, there is one called Worldle where you guess things, like you guess countries based on their shape. Which, okay, I want to get on my soapbox for a second while I'm distracted from the book. I want to get on my soapbox for a second. Everybody's like, Heardle, Heardle, I have Heardle for this franchise. I have Heardle for Xenoblade Chronicles. It's not Heardle. It is Name That Tune. It has been named Name That Tune for a good while. But no, everybody got excited about Wordle, and now Heardle. Ooh, you hear dull things. No. I hear how dull your brain is because you don't know about Name That Tune, the much better known game. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. don't come at me, Wizards of the Coast. It's spelled differently from a turtle. But that's my soapbox for tonight. I'm very upset by the name Heardle. It's nonsense bandwagoning. Local old man screams at cloud is 100% correct. That's 100% what's happening right now. I am going full scream at cloud because someone reminded me that Heardle exists, and it's stupid. It's a stupid, stupid bandwagoning name, and I won't brook it. You are playing Name That Tune. Uh, all hail the glow cloud. All hail the glow cloud. God, I am so behind on Welcome to Night Vale. The last thing I listened to, it was like after the doors, like Carlos had finally escaped from the weird, like, parallel dimension he was in. Uh, for a while, like, they got married, I think. Like, there was this whole, like, they were finally digging into the subplot with, like, Desert Bluffs being, um, Desert Bluffs being decorporatized or something. Like, that's where I was. Like, what's his name? Dude with the permanent smile, not, like, the Desert Bluffs mirror of our main character. Kevin, that's his name. Um, yeah, he was stuck in the desert that Carlos was not stuck in anymore, I think. And like he was doing his little Desert Bluffs podcast, and then like I got distracted by like 12 other podcasts at once, so I'm a long way behind on Welcome to Night Vale. Really, what I really miss from Welcome to Night Vale is the weather, where they like show a random band to you, because there's been some really great bands on Welcome to Night Vale's weather, personally. Uh, I don't adore all of them, but there are really good ones in there. Honestly, I thought the soapbox ramp was going to be about imperialism and arbitrary country borders in Africa. Uh, Honestly, given we were talking about Wordle or Worldle, and kind of, we're reading a very British novel, that could have been a soapbox. The trouble is, I don't know enough about imperialism in Africa, so that's not my soapbox. I'm not about to stand on a soapbox and yell about something I don't know about. That's just a bad idea. Hmm. If you see something, say nothing, and drink to forget. Peak welcome to Night Vale right there. I'm glad you are a history nerd. I have very specific and narrow historical knowledge. I will not know I will not know vast swaths of history that it would probably make sense for me to know, but I can tell you I'm trying to think of something weirdly specific that I have in my brain actively. Um, for a while there, I was working on a video on the history of barcodes, and I could tell you when the ISBN and the ISMN were inducted as standards, but I don't remember that anymore. But I have very narrow slices of very specific history in my brain. I am not broadly a history person. But I have gotten woefully, horribly distracted. Uh, oh yeah, Van Helsing was trying to figure out what Jonathan had heard, or what Jonathan had done before going to Transylvania. That's where we were. Look here, sir. Does what you have to do concern the Count? It does. Then I'm with you, heart and soul. As you go by the 10:30 train, you will not have time to read them, but I shall get the bundle of papers. You can take them with you and read them in the train. After breakfast, I saw him to the station, and when we were parting, he said, "Perhaps you will come to town if I send you and take Madame Mina too." "Ah, we shall both come when you will," I said. I had got him the morning papers and the London papers of the previous night, and while we were talking at the carriage window, waiting for the train to start, he was turning them over. His eyes suddenly seemed to catch something in one of them, the Westminster Gazette. I knew it by the colour, and he grew quite pale. He read something intently, groaning to himself. God, my God, so soon, so soon! I do not think he remembered me at the moment. Just then the whistle blew and the train moved off. This recalled him to himself, and he leaned out the window and waved his hand, calling out, "Love to Madam Mina. I shall write so soon as ever I can." I exist to tangent, sometimes, easily distracted. Uh, uh, you gotta be down for some tangents if you're around here, and that goes triple if we're on tabletop RPG night. Uh, I already can get like, oh man, what's this minor detail, and I'm immediately Googling on camera. A box of chocolates. Yeah, you never know what you're gonna get around here. It's true, Dracula. Now that we've paid attention now that we've returned back to the book, Dracula. But yeah, especially on tabletop RPG night, I will start rattling on about how Rob Liefeld is actually a terrible character designer. He learned like 4 character designs and then sat on them for the rest of time. This man made Cable and went, Cable's so tortured, but he didn't know how to write Cable. Cable was not a good character until Liefeld did not have his hands on him, and I will die on that hill. Although, to be honest, a lot of 90s comics are that way, and noughties comics for that matter, like the 2000s comics. 90s and 2000s comics, there's a ton of characters that are horrible in their initial run, and then someone else picks them up and they become fantastic. But it's not comic book night. Erase all of that from your brain. Dracula was your first book? That's a good start. I did War of the Worlds initially. I guess the first book on Twitch was something completely different. The first book on Twitch was a issue of Astounding Stories Now Analog, but the first episode on the radio was War of the Worlds. Local man continues to get distracted despite saying that he's going to read the book. Dr. Sewart's diary on the 26th of September. Truly, there is no such thing as finality. Not a week since I said finis, and yet here I am, starting fresh again, or rather going on with the same record. Until this afternoon, I had no cause to think of what is done. Renfield had become, to all intents, as sane as he ever was. He was already well ahead with his fly business, and he had just started in the spider line also, so he had not been of any trouble to me. I had a letter from Arthur, written on Sunday, and from it I gather that he's bearing up wonderfully well. Quincy Morris is with him, and that is much of a help, for he himself is a bubbling well of good spirits. Quincy wrote me a line, too, and from that I hear that Arthur is beginning to recover something of his old buoyancy. So as to them, all my mind is at rest. As for myself, I was settling down to my work with the enthusiasm which I used to have for it, so that I might fairly have said that the wound which poor Lucy left on me was becoming cicatrized. Everything is, however, now reopened, and what is to be the end, God only knows. I have an idea that Van Helsing thinks he knows too, but he will only let out enough at a time to whet curiosity. He went to Exeter yesterday, and stayed there all night. Today he came back and almost bounded into the room at about 5:30 and thrust last night's Westminster Gazette into my hand. If you like old radio programs, there is a group on archive.org called the Old Time Radio Researchers. OTRR is the easiest thing to search. They have a ton of old radio dramas. That's how I found Dimension X and X-1. I would heartily suggest that, obviously. War of the Worlds actually, the whole spiel about it being, old-time radio researchers. Old-time radio researchers. I might have that second R wrong. OTRR is the best thing to search. You will likely find what you mean, or likely find what you need. There's a big pile of public domain radio dramas. I used them as backing for a Minecraft series for a while, because I was like, man, I love Dimension X. OTRR is epic. I firmly agree with you, Gariki. There's Dimension X and X-1 for some sci-fi angles. There's a ton of noir detective stuff. I think there's several cowboy serials, which I'm not super into cowboy serials. I would be more interested in the noir serials than the cowboy serials, but that's just a matter of personal taste. There's a bunch of stuff over there. What was I saying? War of the Worlds. Yeah, that was actually just marketing. Like, they paid off some newspapers. As is Relic Radio. I think I've seen that one around. I have not dug as far into it, but that sounds like something familiar. Like I said, I haven't touched it very far, but sounds familiar. War of the Worlds causing mass panic due to Orson Welles not warning people. Marketing stunt. But it has stuck so hard to this story that I was like, I have to open with War of the Worlds. I have to. It's required. I'm on the radio, and I'm reading aloud. War of the Worlds is probably the first instance of viral marketing. 100% accurate. Correct. But I was like, I don't think I can, in good conscience, read anything but War of the Worlds as my first book. It immediately sprung to mind. I love H.G. Wells. And I couldn't think of anything else. I was like, I have to do War of the Worlds. And then I did War of the Worlds, and I was like, wait a minute, there's a bunch of these serials here. What do you mean the serials are public domain? I'm reading these. Then I read those for months. We are both correct. I am glad I am on the line about that, Arnell. And I've never heard it referred to as virally marketed, Gariki, but you are 100% correct. I agree with you. Um, but yeah, uh, shout outs to the old episodes. We will probably eventually return to Astounding Stories soon, eventually. I still have some of the Astounding Stories around. I may just keep them for the short stories to finish out books. I got a bunch of short stories that I want to just like have a whole month of short stories episodes just to kind of cleanse the palate. We've been reading long form stuff a lot. Where was I? My first read on Twitch was Fairy Tales, but the first book was Wells' Tales of Time and Space. Did we do Tales of Time and Space? We did do Time and Space because you advised me on what's in Tales of Time and Space. The newspaper felt threatened by radio. I mean, yeah, quite literally. And they were also very advertisers were very hesitant to invest in radio ads because you couldn't turn the page away from a radio ad, in the same fashion. Same deal when TV replaced radio, and then same deal again when internet replaced TV. Uh, it's video killed the radio star all the way down, and it will continue as soon as somebody thinks up something more entertaining than what we're doing right now. I really need to tune in for the fairy tales, but you're also in a very different time zone than me, and that makes it a little difficult. But I would love to tune into some fairy tales at some point. We cannot stay on topic tonight, can we? Uh, ain't never. I have never been the type to stay on topic for too long. Arthur is beginning to recover. Citrusized. Everything, however, is now reopening. God only knows. Westminster Gazette. That's where we were. I'm attempting fairy tales in the morning. Ooh, if I can show up in time, I'll drop by. Oh crap! Witnesses. Anyway, Westminster Gazette in my hand. What do you think of that? He asked as he stood back and folded his arms. I looked over the paper, for I really did not know what he meant, but he took it from me and pointed out a paragraph about children being decoyed away at Hampstead. It did not convey much to me until I reached a passage where it described small puncture wounds on their throats. An idea then struck me, and I looked up. Well? Well? It's like poor Lucy's. And what do you make of it? Simply that there was some cause in common. Whatever it was that injured her has injured them. I did not quite understand his answer. That is true indirectly, but not directly. How do you mean, Professor? I was a little inclined to take his seriousness lightly, for after all, 4 days of rest and freedom from burning, harrowing anxiety does help to restore one's spirits, but when I saw his face, it sobered me. Never, even in the midst of our despair about poor Lucy, that he looked more stern. Distraction is often distracted is 100% a theme here, and I'm glad you picked up on it, and I'm glad the chat also has it. Add the date to my calendar tomorrow. Ooh, true. Yeah, hopefully I can drop by for some fairy tales at some point. I've already given the Codex spiel, but like Codex exists. If you didn't know, uh, we're all reading streamers. We all read stuff. Some of us do it in a funny voice. Some of us do it in character. Some of us have a coin pusher going in the background. One of us is a professional audiobook narrator, unlike me, who tried professional audiobook narrating and bounced right the heck off of it. And we'll see if I ever get back to it. There's also me. Uh, there's several of us who like yeah, we spread across like a great number of genres. There's a Discord. There is a book club. We're reading something by Herman Melville right now for it. Bartleby the Scrivener, that's what it is. Took me a moment to catch that one and almost ran away. Someone's dog is barking. Hopefully that's not coming across on screen. My cats have big opinions about it. A plague of words. A plague of words is a good description of all my content. Okay, good. I can't hear that anymore. Some of us pretend to be reading streamers, but have been doing a lot of app games lately. Listen, visual novels count as reading, right? I hope visual novels count as reading because I shoved all my visual novels into a reading playlist on YouTube. So if they don't count, that entire, like a giant chunk of that playlist doesn't count. As long as there is text on screen, even if you're playing a point and click, I would count it. But, the line between a point and click and a visual novel is very, very thin with some of these VNs that have, like, really involved mechanics. I'm like, are you sure you're a visual novel and not, like, some kind of point and click? The person who just riled up that dog just yelled in my front door, sorry about that, bro. I appreciate it. God, where were we? I can't focus on the book tonight. He looked more stern. That's where we were. Tell me, I can hazard no opinion. I do not know what to think, and I have no data on which to found a conjecture. You mean to tell me, friend John, that you have no suspicion as to what poor Lucy died of, and not after all the hints given, not only by events but by me, of nervous prostration following on great loss or waste of blood, and how the blood lost or waste? I shook my head. He stepped over and sat down beside me and went on. You're a clever man, friend John. You reason well, and your wit is bold, but you are too prejudiced. You do not let your eyes see, nor your ears hear, and that which is outside your daily life is not of account to you. Do you not think that there are things which you cannot understand, and yet which are? That some people see things that others cannot? But other things, old and new, which must not be contemplated by men's eyes because they know, or think they know, some things which other men have told them. It's the fault of our science that want to explain it all, and if it explain not, then it says there's nothing to explain. Yet we see around us every day the growth of new beliefs, which think themselves new, and which are yet but the old, which pretend to be young, like the fine ladies of the opera. I suppose you now do not believe in corporeal transference, no, nor in materialization, no, nor in astral bodies, no, nor in the reading of thought, no, nor in hypnotism. Weird to see hypnotism called out as something not to be believed in, because hypnotism, like, I get it historically. Like, hypnotism and mesmerism was, like, a huge point of, like, debate and charlatanism in England at the point when this was set. Uh, the foundational theory of hypnotism and mesmerism, as such, was like being laid down earlier in this like time period because this is set, 1880s, 1890s. There is an actual year, and I've said it before, but the foundational theories of hypnotism and mesmerism. What's his name? Starts with a C. Can't remember his name, but he starts with a C. His work in developing confusion type inductions and the how and why of practical hypnotism, which is still used as foundational uh, understanding of modern hypnotism. Uh, Carrington, you know. That might actually be the right name. Give me a second. Let me Google that. Hypnotism scholar starts with C. Yeah, you were joking with Carrington, but it might actually be. Uh, History of hypnosis may have the article I'm looking for. Thank you, Wikipedia. Sorry, this is actually on topic because it is mentioned. Pre 19th century predecessors to Mesmer, Paracelsus, Magnets, Franz Anton Mesmer, which is why it's called mesmerism. Not who I'm thinking of. Abbe Faria. 19th century hypnotism may have who I need here. Karl Reichenbach, James Braid. Not James Braid. What is this guy's name? His whole thing was he developed like intricate theories about how to confuse one's waking mind in order to force a hypnotic state, and he did some very foundational work in understanding of fractionation. Oh, what's this guy's name? Not Charcot. That's close though. I may be thinking of the wrong name. Contemporary researchers, maybe? No, not contemporary researchers. Uh, what is this guy's name? I cannot remember the guy's name, and uh, Google is not pulling it up. Um, but for context, yeah, pre 18th century hypnosis, or yeah, 18th century, 19th century hypnosis. Uh, yeah, earlier in this century, in the 1840s and 50s, Karl Reichenbach began experiments to find any scientific validity to mesmeric energy, which he called odic force after the Norse god Odin. Although his conclusions were quickly rejected in the scientific community, they did undermine Mesmer's claims of mind control. So, you know, earlier in this century, hypnotism was disproven very aggressively. And while hypnotism does exist, it is in a much more limited context. What is this guy's name? This is going to drive me nuts. I'm going to keep talking about this. Hypnotism does can work, but it's clearly functioning on mind over matter. Like it essentially leverages your ability to mind over matter yourself. And in order to activate that, there are certain ways to do so. Um, the biggest thing is there is no one size fits all guide. You can follow big signposts, but it does not work. Like it's something that would work on, me, for example, may not work on Gariki, may not work on RNL, or it will work, but it will work better if you learn the push and pull points. What is this guy's name? I have. No, 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 no. I cannot read any of these tweets aloud, but I have someone. I know of someone who has mentioned this person many times, and that's why I know about the hypnotism scholar I'm thinking of. Um, Sorry, this is on topic, I promise. Mm, 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 mm. Where is the okay, you're rattling about things that you're selling, you're rattling about your book. Dang it. This is gonna annoy me. But in short, hypnotism was you're not thinking Carl Jung, are you? I am not thinking Carl Jung. That is not who I'm thinking of. That would be the obvious answer, and that would be too easy. It's not who I'm thinking of. Talking about subtlety, making people more suggestible. This person is clearly very um. Mm, mm, mm. I am not going to be able to find this, and it's going to drive me absolutely bonkers. Uh, yeah. You're posting things. You're posting things. Where's the thing I want? There's a very specific. Oh, it's not on this person's Twitter. It's on a file. And I'm going to forget to even look it up. Yeah, at this point, I am looking it up on stream specifically so I do not forget to look it up and so it does not eat me alive thinking about it all night. Make a note and find it later, bring it up next time. Yeah, I will forget to look it up and it will drive me bonkers. I found a file, a text file that has potentially what I want. Neurolinguistic processing, facing leading and ambiguity. Ah! Milton Erickson. I was completely wrong on how the person's name is spelled. Milton Erickson. Oh, mid 1900s. No. Okay, so I was completely wrong on the time period. Never mind. Milton Erickson did not produce his research in time for it to affect this novel. It's probably 30, 40 to 50 years too late. So that's. It has a C in it. Erickson does have a C in it. You're technically correct, and that's the best kind of correct. Anyway, now that I've gotten thoroughly distracted and shown my cards a little bit on having a why the heck does hypnosis work hyperfixation in the past, Um, yeah, Milton Erickson did like foundational research on why the confusion induction works and how you can press it further on given subjects. And like anyway, it's irrelevant here. At this point in time in the 1880s, late 1880s, early 1890s, regardless of when the actual year is, um, hypnotism had been firmly disproven as quackery and party tricks by the aforementioned person searching for information about it by calling it the Odinic force, and it was more broadly still considered under the like hypnotism was a subclass of mesmerism, which was learned about via literally a guy named Mesmer. So hypnotism is quack science at this point in time, and it arguably is. There are many people who will argue with you that it is continuing to be quack science, but I just think it's one of those fun mind over matter things that it literally only works because your brain thinks it works. It's kind of like a placebo. Like you don't call a placebo quack science. I could talk about this all night, and I have talked about it probably a good 20 minutes too long. Love that. But yeah, the history of hypnotism is actually incredibly fascinating, and I'm shocked no one's written books on the matter. Like, or even just like a small slice of the history of mesmerism and hypnotism. It's actually really cool. It's really neat. Uh, I've been I have recently fallen back into that hole. Yeah, that is the topic we're on. It was mentioned in the book. This guy was like listing off a bunch of quack sciences that Van Helsing was listing off a bunch of quack sciences that the Dr. Seward was like, that's not a real thing. Because he was like, I don't know what to do because I don't have information to work with. And I don't know why you're making me draw conclusions when I don't know the whole situation, because Van Helsing knows there are vampires happening, but Dr. Seward does not, and so Van Helsing is like, why don't you know vampire things? I know vampire things. And and so he was like listing off quack scientists, and I was like, and I tripped and fell into the hole that is the history of hypnotism and mesmerism. Which, by the way, did you know you cannot hypnotize people legally on British television? That's how I fell in this hole originally. Tom Scott made a video about like, yeah, you can't legally hypnotize people on British television. The Ofcom, which is the FCC but Britain, isn't going to call you on it, but you can't do that. And I was like, what do you mean you can't do that? Typing. And I learned a bunch of stuff about it. But I promise it is adjacently on topic to the book. Oh, man. I'm just going to keep all this off topic stuff for the podcast. This episode's just going to be like, I get distracted by hypnosis for 20 minutes. Skip ahead to here. Anyway. You don't believe in hypnotism, says Van Helsing. Yes, Charcot has proved that pretty well. Oh, literally, a name that starts, that's where it came from as I read a line ahead. And I was like, oh yeah, this person starts with a C. No, Charcot starts with a C. And we were literally talking about him earlier. My brain is so full of holes. He smiled as he went on.
And you are satisfied as to it? Yes. And of course, then you understand how it acts and can follow the mind of the great Charcot, alas that he is no more, into the very soul of the patient that he influences. No. Then, friend John, am I to take it that you simply accept fact and are satisfied to let from premise to a conclusion be a blank? No. Then tell me, for I'm a student of the brain, how you accept the hypnotism and reject the thought reading. Let me tell you, my friend, there are things done today in electrical science which would have been deemed unholy by the very men who discovered electricity, who would have themselves, not so long before, would have been burned as wizards. There are always mysteries in life. Why was it that Methuselah lived 900 years and old Parr 169, and yet that poor Lucy, with 4 men's blood in her poor veins, could not live even one day? For had she lived one more day, we could have saved her. Do you know all the mystery of life and death? Do you know altogether the comparative anatomy, and can say wherefore the qualities of brutes are in some men and not in others? Can you tell me why, when other spiders die small and soon, that one great spider lived for centuries in the tower of the old Spanish church, and grew and grew and grew, till on descending he could drink the oil of the church lamps? Can you tell me why in the pampas, aye, and elsewhere, there are bats that come at night and open the veins of cattle and horses and suck dry their veins? How in some islands of the western seas there are bats which hang on the trees all day, and those who have been described as like giant nuts or pods, that when the sailors sleep on the deck it's because it's hot. They flit down on them, and then in the morning they're found dead men, white as even as Miss Lucy was.
There is where Bram Stoker is like, this is what's happening. There are bats. Vampire bats that eat people's blood. What is this emote is especially for ants, Kebo. What is this? Is it a lumpy space princess? OMG. Oh. Welcome to the Igloo Jamie Buggy. My alerts are behind the book. That's not supposed to happen. What if I just do this? What if I just move this where it belongs? Boop. No, that did not work. That decidedly did not work. It put it where it did not belong, actually. Okay, then we'll just do that. And then we'll just do this. Okay, now my alerts should show up, right? Cool and good. Why did they do that? Why did I put the alerts that way? Anyway, where was I? Yeah, Bram Stoker has finally showed his hand and been like, hey, vampire bats exist. Good God, Professor, I said, starting up.
Do you mean to tell me that Lucy was bitten by that such a thing is here in London in the 19th century? He waved his hand for silence and went on. Before he goes on, let's read the chat. Oh, it's just literally a lumpy space princess. Oh my glob. Okay. I was like, what is this text for ants? But I got the idea with it being an emote that says OMG and is lumpy space princess. We take that. Can you tell me why the tortoise lives more long than the generations of men? Why the elephant goes on till you have seen dynasties, and why the parrot never die, only of bite of cat or of dog or of other complaint? Can you tell me why men believe in all ages and places there are some few who live on always if they be permitted, but there are men and women who cannot die? We all know because science has vouched for the fact. There have been toads shut up in rocks for thousands of years, shut in one small hole that can only hold him since the youth of the world. Can you tell me how the Indian fakir can make himself to die and have been buried, and his grave sealed and corn sown on it, the corn reaped and cut and sown and reaped and cut again? Then the men come and take away the unbroken seal. There lie the Indian fakir, not dead, but that rises up and walks amongst them as before. Here I interrupted him. I was getting bewildered. He so crowded on my mind his list of nature's eccentricities and possible impossibilities that my imagination was getting fired. I had a dim idea that he was teaching me some lesson, as so long ago he used to do in his study at Amsterdam, but he used then to tell me the thing so that I could have the object of thought in mind all the time. But now I was without this help, yet I wanted to follow him, so I said, Professor, let me be your pet student again. Tell me the thesis, so that I may apply your knowledge as you go on. At present, I am going in my mind from point to point as a madman, and not a sane one, follows an idea. I feel like a novice lumbering through a bog in a mist, jumping from one tussock to another in the mere blind effort to move on without knowing where I'm going. That is good image. Well, I shall tell you, my thesis is this. I want you to believe. To believe what? To believe in things that you cannot. Let me illustrate. I heard once of an American who so defined faith, the faculty which enables us to believe things which we know to be untrue. For one, I follow that man. He meant that we shall have an open mind, and not let a little bit of truth check the rush of a big truth. Like a small rock does a railway track. We get a small truth first. Good. We keep him and we value him, but all the same we must not let him think of himself all the truth in the universe. Then you want me not to let some previous conviction endure the receptivity of my mind with regard to some strange matter. Do I lead your lesson right? You are my favorite pupil still. It is worth to teach you. Now that you are willing to understand, you've taken the first step to understand. You think, then, that those small holes in the children's throats were made by the same that made the hole in Miss Lucy? I suppose so. He stood up and said solemnly, Then you're wrong. Oh, would if it were so, but alas, no, it is worse, far, far worse. In God's name, Professor Van Helsing, what do you mean? He threw himself with a despairing gesture into a chair and placed his elbows on the table, covering his face with his hands as he spoke. They were made by Miss Lucy. Dramatic. Okay. I have gotten distracted so thoroughly that I have to go use the restroom. I'm just going to put up the little BRB text real quick. It should be here somewhere. Is it not on this screen? Of course it's not on this screen. Text on screen. I'll be right back.
Oh no! Wait, did we just get raided while I was off doing things? I drink all this water, and naturally it leads to a specific end conclusion. Did we get raided while I was out? I I go leave for 5 seconds and we get raided? Never mind. Are you all just like sending fun emotes? Or did I get a raid that didn't go off correctly? Okay, good. I thought I had gotten up to deal with my water, and we got raided, and I was gonna be real miffed because I have a bad habit of missing raids. Um, okay, book, book. Chapter 15. I made a mistake with my emote. Okay, I was like, oh, did I miss another raid? Hello, library. Actually, we have like 3 minutes left. Think. Oh no, we have like 15 minutes left. Okay. Yeah, let's keep going. And we'll just like, as those 15 minutes come due, we will just stop at the next, what's the word I'm looking for? The next, epistle, maybe? The next like little heading that's not a chapter, it's like, oh yeah, Dr. Seward's diary, a letter. We'll just stop at the next heading closest to, I love the little jiggling emotes. Shake scared. Very good. Anyway, we'll stop at the next heading. Let's dive into update. 2 hours 58 minutes. Thank you. The recording has been running 2 hours 45. So I will. We have 15 minutes to work with. Let's. Whoop. Thank you for the uptime checks. Appreciate it. Let's dive into chapter 15. Dr. Seward's diary continued. For a while, sheer anger mastered me. It was as if he had during her life struck Lucy on the face. I smote the table hard, and rose up as I said to him, "Dr. Van Helsing, are you mad?" He raised his head and looked at me, and somehow the tenderness of his face calmed me at once. Would that I were! Madness was easy to bear compared with truth like this. Oh, my friend, why thank you. Why thank you. Did I go so far round? Why did it take so long to tell you so simple a thing? Was it because I hate you and I have hated you all my life? Was it because I wished to give you pain? Was it that I wanted, now so late, revenge for that time when you saved my life and from a fearful death? No. Forgive me. And he went on. My friend, it was because I wished to be so gentle in the breaking to you. For I know that you have loved that so sweet lady. But even then, I do not expect you to believe. It is so hard to accept at once any abstract truth, that we doubt such to be possible when we've always believed and know of it. It is more hard still to accept so sad a concrete truth, and of such a one as Miss Lucy. Tonight I might go to prove it. Dare you come with me? This staggered me. A man does not like to prove such a truth. Byron accepted from the category, jealousy, and prove the very truth he most abhorred. He saw my hesitation and spoke. The logic is simple. No madman's logic this time, jumping to sock in a musty bog. If it be not true, then proof will be relief. At worst it will not harm. It will be true. There is dread, yet the very dread should help my cause, for in it is some need of belief. Come, tell you what I propose. First, that we go off now and see the child in the hospital. Dr. Vincent of the North Hospital, where the papers say the child is a friend of mine, and I think of yours since you were in class at Amsterdam. He will let 2 scientists see his case, if he will not let 2 friends. We shall tell him nothing, but only that we wish to learn. And then, he took a key from his pocket and held it up. Then we spend the night, you and I, in the churchyard where Lucy lies. This is the key that locks the tomb. I had it from the coffin man to give to Arthur. My heart sank within me, for I felt that there was some fearful ordeal before us. I could do nothing, however, so I plucked up what heart I could and said that we had better hasten, as the afternoon was passing. We found the child awake. It had
It had had a sleep and taken some food, and altogether was going on well. Dr. Vincent took the bandage from its throat and showed us the punctures. There was no mistaking. There was similarity to those which had been on Lucy's throat. They were smaller, and the edges looked fresher, but that was all. We asked Vincent to what he attributed them, and he replied that it must have been a bite of some animal, perhaps a rat, but for his own part he was inclined to think that it was one of the bats which are so numerous on the northern heights of London. Out of so many harmless ones, there may be some wild specimen from the south of a more malignant species. Some sailor may have brought one home, and had managed to escape, or even from the zoological gardens a very young one may have gotten loose, or one be bred there from a vampire. These things do occur, you know. 10 days ago, a wolf got out, and I believe, traced up in this direction. For a week after, the children were playing nothing but Red Riding Hood on the heath and in every alley in the place. And until this Bloofer lady came along, since when it has been quite a gala time with him. Even this poor little mite, when he woke up today, asked the nurse if he might go away. When she asked him why he wanted to go, he said he wanted to go play with the Bloofer lady. I hope that when you're sending the child home, you will caution its parents to keep strict watch over it. These fancies to stray are most dangerous, and if the child were to remain out another night, it would probably be fatal. But in any case, I will suppose you'll not let it away for some days? Certainly not. Not for a week, at least, longer, if the wound is not healed. Our visit to the hospital took more time than we had reckoned on, and the sun had dipped before we came out. When Van Helsing saw how dark it was, he said, "There is no hurry. It's more late than I thought. Come, let us seek somewhere that we may eat, and then we shall go on our way." We dined at a Jack Straw's castle, along with a little crowd of bicyclists and others who were generally noisy. About 10 o'clock we started from the inn. It was then very dark, and the scattered lamps made the darkness greater when we were once outside their individual radius. The professor had evidently noted the road we were to go, for he went on unhesitatingly, but as for me, I was in quite a mix-up as to locality. As we went further, we met fewer and fewer people, till at last we were somewhat surprised when we met even the patrol of the horse police going around their usual suburban journeys. At last we reached the wall of the churchyard, which we climbed over. With some little difficulty, for it was very dark, and the whole place seemed so strange to us, we found the Westenra tomb. The professor took the key, opened the creaky door, and standing back, politely, but quite unconsciously, motioned me to precede him. There was a delicious irony in the offer, in the courtliness of giving preference on such a ghastly occasion. My companion followed me quickly, and cautiously drew the door to, after carefully ascertaining that the lock was a falling and not a spring one. In the latter case, we should have been in a bad plight. Then he fumbled his bag, and taking out a matchbox and a piece of candle, proceeded to make a light. The tomb, in the daytime, and when wreathed with fresh flowers, had looked grim and gruesome enough, but now, some days afterwards, when the flowers hung lank and dead, their whites turning to rust and their greens to browns, when the spider and the beetle had resumed their accustomed dominance, when the time-discolored stone and dust-enriched mortar and rusty, dank iron, tarnished brass, clouded silver plating gave back the feeble glimmer of a candle, the effect was more miserable and sordid than could have been imagined. It conveyed irresistibly the idea that life, animal life, was not the only thing which could pass away. Van Helsing went about his work systematically, holding his candle so that he could read the coffin plates, and so holding it that today I learned that the wax coming off of a candle can be called a sperm? Huh. Yeah. Apparently, holding his candle so that he could read the coffin plates, and so holding it that the sperm dropped in white patches which congealed as they touched the metal, he made assurance of Lucy's coffin. Another searched in his bag, and he took out a turn screw. "What are you going to do?" "Well, open the coffin. You shall yet be convinced." Straightway he began taking out the screws, and finally lifted off the lid, showing the casing of lead beneath. The sight was almost too much for me. It seemed to be as much of an affront to the dead as it would have been to see her stripped of her clothing in her sleep while living. I actually took hold of his hand to stop him. He only said, "You shall see." And again, fumbling in his bag, he took out a tiny fret saw, striking the turn screw through the lead with a swift downward stab which made me wince. He made a small hole, which was, however, big enough to admit the point of the saw. I had expected a rush of gas from the weak old corpse. We doctors, who have had to study our dangers, have become accustomed to such things, and I drew back from the door, but the professor never stopped for a moment. He sawed down a couple of feet along one side of the lead coffin, then across and down the other side. Taking the edge of the loose flange, he bent it back toward the foot of the coffin, and holding up the candle into the aperture, motioned to me to look. I drew near and looked. The coffin was empty. It was certainly a surprise to me, and gave me a considerable shock, but Van Helsing was unmoved. He was now more sure than ever of his ground, and so emboldened to proceed in his task. "Are you satisfied now, friend John?" I felt all the dogged argumentativeness of my nature awake within me as I answered him. "I am satisfied that Lucy's body is not in that coffin, but that only proves one thing." "What's that, John?" That it is not there." "That is good logic, so far as it goes, but how can you account for it not being there?" Perhaps the body snatcher, some of the Undertaker's people, may have stolen it." I felt that I was speaking folly, and yet it was only I felt that I was speaking folly, and yet that it was the only real cause which I could suggest. The professor sighed. "Yeah, well, we must have more proof then. Come with me." He put on the coffin lid again, gathered up all his things, and placed them in the bag, blew out the light, and placed the candle also in the bag. We opened the door and went out. Behind us, he closed the door and locked it. He handed me the key, saying, "Will you keep it? You'd better be assured." I laughed. It wasn't a very cheerful laugh, I'm bound to say, as I motioned him to keep it. "A key is nothing. There may be duplicates, and anyhow it's not that difficult to pick a lock of that kind." He said nothing, but put the key in his pocket. Then he told me to watch at one side of the churchyard, whilst he would watch at the other. I took up my place behind a yew tree, and I saw his dark figure move until the intervening headstones and trees hid it from my sight. It was a lonely vigil. Just after I had taken my place, I heard a distant clock strike 12, and in time came 1 and 2. I was chilled and unnerved, and angry with the professor for taking me on such an errand, and with myself for coming. I was too cold and too sleepy to be keenly observant, and not sleepy enough to betray my trust, so altogether I had a dreary, miserable time. Suddenly, as I turned round, I thought I saw something like a white streak moving between two dark yew trees at the side of the churchyard farthest from the tomb. At the same time, a dark mass moved from the professor's side of the ground and hurriedly went toward it. Then I too moved, but I had to go round headstones and railed off tombs, and I stumbled over graves. The sky was overcast, and somewhere far off an early cock crowed. A little way off, beyond a line of scattered juniper trees which marked the pathway to the church, a white, dim figure flitted in the direction of the tomb. The tomb itself was hidden by trees, and I could not see where the figure disappeared. I heard the rustle of actual movement where I had first seen the white figure, and coming over, found the professor holding in his arms a tiny child. When he saw me, he held it out to me and said, "Are you satisfied now?" "No," I said, in a way that I felt was aggressive. "Do you not see the child?" "Yes, it is a child, but who brought it here? Is it wounded?" "We shall see," said the professor. With about one impulse, we took our way out of the churchyard, he carrying the sleeping child. When we had got some little distance away, we went to a clump of trees and struck a match, looking at the child's throat. It was without a scratch or scar of any kind. "Was I right?" I asked triumphantly. "You were just in time." We had now to decide what we were to do with the child, and so consulted about it. If we were to take it to a police station, we should have to give some account of our movements during the night. At least, we should have had to make some statement as to how we'd come to find the child. So finally, we decided that we would take it to the heath, and when we heard a policeman coming, we'd leave it where he could not fail to find it. We would then seek our way home as quickly as we could. All fell out well. At the edge of Hampstead Heath, we heard a policeman's heavy tramp, and laying the child on the pathway, we waited and watched until he saw it as he flashed his lantern to and fro. We heard his exclamation of astonishment, then we went away silent. By good chance, we got a cab near the Spaniards, and drove to town. I cannot sleep, and so I make this entry. But I must try to get a few hours' sleep, as Van Helsing is to call for me at noon. He insists that I shall go with him on another expedition. Okay, folks. As much as I want to continue, I direly want to continue. Actually, we've really hit some remarkable action here, but we will be coming back to this next week to find out whether our friend Jonathan finally realizes what's what, like all of us as modern readers have realized what's what. But this has been Paper Cuts, and I hope it didn't sting.